Chapter 220. Hearing the girl say so, Ling Han's impression of Gu Fenghua instantly improved considerably. Using tricks to force someone to bathe and taking the opportunity to steal was a very despicable thing to do. However, this girl was obviously not a decent person the moment she opened her mouth, which meant that Gu Fenghua still had a sense of propriety and didn't use such despicable methods on a decent girl. As the saying went, even thieves had their own principles. Although this was a bit far from it, it was still a kind of principle. A pervert with principles. Ling Han covered Niu Niu's ears, and said, "Miss is so unrestrained, does your family know?" Giggle, giggle, giggle. The girl laughed so hard that her body shook. She winked at Ling Han, and said, "Little big brother, could it be that you are interested in my master? Though my master is a bit older, she still has her charm. Young men like you are the most unable to hold back." Ling Han shivered, turned to Gu Fenghua, and said, "Pervert, you solve your own problem." After saying so, he carried Hu Niu and walked towards the lake. Now that the place was empty, Hu Niu could naturally bathe. Yeah. Hu Niu jumped down from Ling Han's body, took off all her clothes in a few moves, and jumped into the lake with a splash, playing to her heart's content. "Ling Han, accompany Niu," she said coquettishly to Ling Han. Ling Han smiled and waved his hand. He didn't want to undress in front of others, especially when the girl was shockingly unrestrained. Peng, peng, peng. The sounds of fighting soon came from the dense forest. In a short while, Gu Fenghua walked over with a swollen face, no different from a pig's head. However, the girl was nowhere to be seen. Ling Han was puzzled, and said, "That girl is only in the 9th layer of Pali, how did pervert bro end up in such a sorry state?" Gu Fenghua cast a disdainful look at Ling Han, and said, "A good man doesn't fight with a girl." A muscle twitched in the corner of Ling Han's mouth. That was why he had been beaten up so severely. However, that girl should have known that Gu Fenghua's abilities were far above hers, so she had fled after giving him a good beating to avoid arousing Gu Fenghua's killing intent. In a mystic realm like this, the use of a background was greatly reduced. As long as the deed was done cleanly, who would know who did it? Ha 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 ha, how did your cultivation drop to the 1st layer of Pali? Gu Fenghua suddenly laughed loudly, then scratched his head. Other people become more powerful the more they cultivate, but the more you cultivate, the more you regress. And, as expected, you also have the potential to be a little abnormal. Ling Han could not help but shake his head. If he had not broken through to gushing spring tear, his current state would have attracted a lot of hatred. That's strange. Although your cultivation is low, why is it that you're giving me an even more oppressive feeling? Gu Fenghua asked with a face full of confusion. He scratched his head, appearing to be very troubled. "Ha, you really are a pervert." In the end, he attributed the reason to being a pervert. In any case, as long as one was a pervert, no matter how strange one was, it could be explained with this word. Ling Han did not want to dwell on this matter, and said, "Didn't you return to the mountain to cultivate? Why did you come here again?" "On my way back, I met a heaven celestial, and tried to strike up a conversation with her. In the end, I ended up here for some inexplicable reason, and was also separated from that heaven celestial." Gu Fenghua was suddenly startled, and said, "I'm not going to talk nonsense with you anymore. I'm going to find my dream lover." Xiao, he broke into a run, and in an instant, disappeared without a trace. Ling Han shook his head, fetched some clean water from the lake, and washed his face. Hu Niu had no interest in playing in the water by herself, so after washing herself clean, she ran ashore and coquettishly asked Ling Han to wipe her clean and help her put on her clothes. Only then did she smile sweetly. The two of them continued on their way, and saw a lot of killing on the way. The people of the 9 nations were gathered here. Perhaps it was not random when they were randomly teleported, meaning that the people of the same nation could appear in the same large area, but as they neared the ring-shaped mountain, because there were only 4 canyons that led to the inside of the mountain, the people of different nations began to encounter each other in large numbers. Ling Han's principle was that if you don't provoke me, I won't bother with you. As a former heaven-tier elite, he was very indifferent to the concept of his country. Brother, help me. However, he didn't have the luxury of remaining on his own for long. In the wilderness ahead of him, a youth was currently rushing towards him, and behind him were two middle-aged men wielding blades and swords. Both of them had ferocious looks on their faces. With one look, it was obvious that this was a robbery. It was no wonder that this young man would be targeted. His clothes were luxurious, made of fine silk, and the various ornaments he wore were all luxurious. Firstly, he was the son of a wealthy clan, and should have been separated from the elders of his clan due to the random teleportation here. However, he only had a cultivation level of the 5th layer of Pali. This was like a fool carrying gold and swaggering through the streets. It would be strange if he did not attract the covetous eyes of others. This young man was like a drowning man who had found a straw. He did not care that Ling Han was younger than him, and that there was even a little girl by his side. He turned around and ran towards Ling Han while shouting loudly. With his life on the line, his speed actually miraculously increased slightly. Very soon, he had arrived behind Ling Han. As he pointed at the two people who had already caught up to him, he said, "Brother, help me beat them back, and I will definitely reward you well." Huh? The two pursuers stopped. One of them wielded a saber, while the other wielded a sword. They both sized up Ling Han, and then laughed loudly. I was wondering what kind of powerful fellow it was. So it's just a kid at the 1st layer of Pali. What? The young man exclaimed. He had thought that since Ling Han dared to walk so casually in the wilderness with a little girl, he should have powerful strength. He did not think that he was only at the 1st layer of Pali, which was much weaker than him. Ling Han could not help but sigh. After fusing with the 9 nuclei, his cultivation level dropped drastically. Not only did his friends worry for him, but he was also looked down upon when he was outside. How depressing. Perfect, I'll kill the two of them together. The saber wielder revealed a fierce look. Shua, he had just spoken when he shot out, waving his long saber and slashing towards Ling Han. Ling Han very casually raised his hand, and the other's wrist fell into his hand. The other was only at the 9th layer of Pali. Even if they were at the same tier, Ling Han's 5-element origin nuclei could be many times stronger than him, not to mention that he had advanced to the 10th layer, and his strength was comparable to the 1st layer of Gushing Spring tier. Huh? The saber wielder struggled, but only felt that the hand that held him was like an iron hoop, and he could not struggle free at all. Fatty, what's wrong with you? What's so fun about playing with a little guy? Quickly kill him, the sword wielder urged. The saber wielder had already broken out in a cold sweat. In front of him, Ling Han's expression was calm, and there was even a hint of a smile on his face. But it was this smile that made him feel a chill that made his guts break. Ta, 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 ta. His teeth continuously chattered, and he said, "Old Zhang, quickly come and help me, this brat is strange." What's strange about him? He's just trash at the 1st layer of Pali, the sword wielder said disdainfully. Fatty, this isn't funny at all. Quickly kill these two brats. Chapter 221. Ling Han casually lashed out with a slap, and with a the fatty wielding the saber was sent flying. The sword-wielding old Zhang's expression tightened. Previously, he thought the fatty was just fooling around, but no matter how much he fooled around, he wouldn't go so far as to take a slap, which instantly made him wary. This brat is strange, the saber-wielding fatty said as he stood up, rubbing his aching cheek. What's strange? The sword-wielding old Zhang asked. He's extraordinarily strong. He held my wrist just now, and I couldn't break free at all. Though the saber-wielding fatty's face heated up, he still told the truth, or else it might cause both of them to die. Could it be that he was born with astonishing physical strength? The sword-wielding old Zhang speculated. Should be, his presence is definitely only at the 1st layer of Pali, the saber-wielding fatty said with absolute certainty. The two of them glared fiercely at Ling Han. Brat, we originally had no grudge, but you insisted on standing out, you're seeking your own death. Ling Han sighed. He had not thought of helping them at all. Since they had entered this place to take the risk, then they had to be prepared to face danger. But who asked that young man to bump into them, and these two impatiently made a move. In the end, he was easy to bully at first, and now that he was rebuffed, they started to take him seriously. Hunyo, I'll leave that skinny guy to you. Ling Han smiled. That was fine, he'd let Hunyo practice. The little girl could play around with that gushing spring tear cultivator of the Wu clan, what more this person in front of her who was only at the 9th layer of poly. Okay. Hunyo immediately jumped out. Fighting and whatnot, that was her favorite thing other than eating, but Ling Han never allowed her to fight in the imperial city. What? The sword-wielding old Zhang was so angry that his nose almost became crooked. He actually let a 5 or 6-year-old little girl deal with him. He couldn't help but look ferocious, wanting to cut this little girl in two with his sword and use her bloody corpse to tell Ling Han that this was the consequence of angering him. Little brat, let's practice again. The fat blade-wielding man twirled his blade. This time, I definitely won't underestimate you again. What he meant was that he had been caught earlier because he had been careless. Ling Han smiled and said, does your face still hurt? You. The knife-wielding fatty was instantly angered and embarrassed. That slap had indeed left him with a burning sensation. Since you know pain, why don't you remember the lesson? Ling Han shook his head, then smiled. In any case, from the moment you delivered the first strike, you were already a dead man. It doesn't matter whether you remember or not. Bullshit. The saber-wielding fatty shouted. He gripped his saber hilt with both hands and unleashed a powerful attack. Great Devil Heaven Saber, cleave the heavens and shatter the earth. I am the Lord of Heaven and Earth, invincible. Puff before he could finish shouting his slogan, he was kicked in the stomach, and his whole body flew out like a cannonball. Peng, he landed heavily on the ground. His whole body shrunk into the shape of a prawn, and his face twitched violently. Ling Han withdrew his foot. He had used 20 to 30% of his power in this attack, but for a 9th layer poly cultivator, this kind of power was enough to cause a fatal wound. However, because this fatty was too fat, he relied on a large amount of fat to disperse the power, so his internal organs actually didn't explode. However, the skin all over his body cracked under the impact of such a huge power, and he instantly became a bloody man, looking extremely wretched. Although he managed to keep his life, the fatty could only groan and had no more battle power left. On the other side, Hunyo was having a great time. Her cultivation also advanced at a ridiculously fast speed, and now that she had reached the 7th layer of poly, she would have no fear even if she faced the old sword-wielding man head-on. However, she used her advantage in speed to continuously circle around the old sword-wielding man's back to launch sneak attacks, making old Zhang unable to even swing his sword once. Shwa, 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 Hunyo's hand was like a tiger's claws. After a few swings, fresh blood spurted madly from old Zhang's back. The fresh blood stimulated Hunyo's murderous nature even more. She half grinned, and her attacks became even more berserk. Behind Ling Han, the young man was dumbstruck. A youngster in the 1st layer of poly crippled an expert in the 9th layer of poly with a kick, and a little girl of only 5 or 6 years old made her opponent unable to fight back at all. What kind of monsters were these two? In a short while, Hunyo had knocked the sword-wielding old Zhang unconscious, and returned to Ling Han's side with a grin, turning back into the cute and pure appearance of a little princess. Pa, pa. Right at that moment, the young man used a rock to smash the heads of both Fatty and old man Zhang into mush. Even if the two of them were in the sky-human realm, they would still be dead for sure. Ling Han couldn't help but take a few more glances at him. This youngster was quite ruthless. Many thanks for benefactor's righteous rescue. The young man hurriedly threw away the rock, his face full of humility, and said, "My name is Yang Ming, and I come from Stone Country. Benefactor, please don't blame me. I was actually chased by them all the way here, and almost lost my life. My heart is filled with hatred. 2 bandits, if they died, then so be it." Ling Han naturally wouldn't take it to heart. What surprised him was Yang Ming's expression when he attacked just now. There was no trace of emotion at all, appearing extremely cold-blooded. "Benefactor, can you let me accompany you? I was separated from my family when I came in, but I believe I can definitely meet them in the central hall ahead. At that time, my family's elders will definitely thank Benefactor heavily." Yang Ming looked earnestly at Ling Han. There was still an unknown amount of distance to the canyon ahead, and there were many dangers everywhere. Obviously, it would be safer to latch onto a powerful backer. Ling Han looked at the other with a faint smile. He wanted him to be a bodyguard with empty promises. This brat was quite good at bluffing. Yang Ming saw that Ling Han was unmoved, and clenched his teeth, saying, "Benefactor, do you know why those 2 wanted to kill me? Because you look like a fat sheep." Ling Han said with a smile. "That's only half of it." Yang Ming shook his head and continued, "In the previous village, my luck was especially good. I found an ancient book, but then I ran into those 2 people and was chased by them. I hid that ancient book in a withered tree on the road. As long as Benefactor agrees to protect me along the way, I am willing to give that ancient book to Benefactor." Ancient book. Ling Han thought about it and said, "What is that ancient book about?" "I just roughly flipped through it. That ancient book should be the diary of the indigenous people here. It recorded some things about the inside of the ring-shaped mountain," Yang Ming said. He paused and said, "There is also a map inside." The last sentence moved Ling Han. He was very interested in the depths of the ring-shaped mountain and wanted to explore the secrets within. "Okay, let's go get the ancient book." Ling Han nodded. Yang Ming was overjoyed. Generally speaking, martial artists' love for books was either martial arts techniques or martial arts techniques. They naturally wouldn't take a second look at other things. He was just taking a gamble, and he didn't expect Ling Han to actually agree. Chapter 222. They walked a bit towards the periphery of the ring-shaped mountain, and sure enough, Yang Ming took out an ancient book from behind a withered tree. The cover was almost completely rotten, and it wasn't hidden very carefully, half of it was even exposed. Obviously, Yang Ming hid behind the tree trunk for a while, casually shoved the ancient book over, and then immediately left, which was why he hid it so carelessly. "Young Master Han, here." Yang Ming handed over the ancient book and lowered his head slightly, a hint of unwillingness that was difficult to detect in his eyes. For a normal person, this ancient book was worthless, but for some people, it could be worth more than 1,000 pieces of gold. Ling Han took it without hesitation. On the way here, he had told the other his name. Benefactor, Benefactor, and so on. It was awkward to hear. He flipped through the pages in front of Yang Ming, not avoiding it at all. This was indeed a predecessor's handwriting, and the beginning part recorded some trivial matters. This person was called Xiao Ding, and was once a village chief, managing a village and living a peaceful life. The ancestors of the Xiao family had lived here for generations, but in Xiao Ding's generation, there had been a change. The entire village had been chased out of the secret realm, but Xiao Ding had used a deceptive trick to stay. He went against the orders of the Demon Master at that time and entered the depths of the ring-shaped mountain, wanting to know why they were chased out. Relying on his understanding of this place, he avoided many obstacles along the way, and was able to go all the way deep into the mountain. However, he couldn't enter the core area of the deep mountain. A mysterious power infected him, making him feel like he wasn't himself anymore. He immediately escaped, but it was too late. He only managed to escape to the original village before feeling powerless. He barely managed to record some of what he heard in the deep mountain, and the diary ended there. He should be dead. Xiao Ding's handwriting described the various restrictions in the deep mountain in detail. This was probably because he was afraid of forgetting, so he recorded it in great detail. Finally, he made some conjectures. The Devil Sky Mystery Realm should be suppressing some terrifying existence, and the Central Hall was a backup plan. Through the method of blood sacrifice, they could strengthen the restrictions deep in the mountains. Perhaps it had existed since a very long time ago, but there was a problem in his previous life. Since the people in the mystic realm had all left, why would there still be a restriction? There was only one possibility. Something was being suppressed inside, an ominous source. Ling Han closed the notebook and fell into deep thought. From the looks of it, the mystic realm was still very stable, so it shouldn't be a problem with the mystic realm itself that was about to collapse. So, why did they evacuate everyone at the time? In the past, a blood zombie had appeared in the Devil Sky Mystery Realm, and Xiao Ding had mentioned an inauspicious source in his notes, believing that something terrifying and evil was sealed here. Were the two related? Back then, was it the appearance of the blood zombie that forced everyone to evacuate? Mystery realms were opened by Shattering Void tier elites, but it didn't mean that every mystery realm had such an elite overseeing it. If Shattering Void tier elites couldn't shatter the void and fight their way into the divine realm, they would still die of old age. Perhaps there was a large number of blood zombies in the depths of the mountains that could not be suppressed unless one had the power of the Shattering Void tier. However, there was no such elite in the Devil Sky Mystery Realm, so they could only be forced to retreat, leaving behind an uninhabited space to trap those things with this mystery realm. Young Master Han, can we set off? Yang Ming asked cautiously. Ling Han nodded and said, let's go. The three set off and advanced forward. After walking for more than half a day, they could finally see a huge canyon in the distance. It was as if a heavenly saber had struck the ring-shaped mountain, forcefully splitting a crack in this huge mountain that seemed to connect the heavens. The fracture that descended from the sky was absolutely terrifying, and Ling Han even felt a sliver of saber intent. In the past, there should have been a supreme elite who struck 4 times, cutting the ring-shaped mountain into 4 sections. Shattering Void tier, it was definitely the Shattering Void tier. Ling Han said inwardly. In his previous life, he didn't have such great power, and only the legendary Shattering Void tier elites had such a great mystical power. Even after countless years, a sliver of saber intent was left behind, unwashed by time. Too terrifying, saber intent that could cross millennia was unheard of. However, although the canyon appeared, it was still a long way to go, and they still needed a long way to reach it. But since the target had already appeared, they were naturally full of vigor. Ah! A scream was heard in the distance. Obviously, there was another fight happening, which was a very common thing here. Shwa, 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 from the dense forest on the left, 6 people suddenly dashed out, each holding a saber or sword in their hands. But now, all of them looked as if they had seen a ghost, their expressions terrified, and only knew how to run for their lives. Xiao, a black shadow darted out, extremely fast. With just a leap, it had already caught up to one of them, and swung its hand towards the back of that person's head. That person seemed to have lost his courage, and actually didn't even dare to parry. He just scattered his legs and ran, but he couldn't compete with the black shadow's speed at all. Instantly, his head was hit, and with a paw, his entire head was smashed into pieces, and a gush of hot blood spurted out. A terrifying and disgusting scene appeared. That black shadow actually pounced, sucking that person's blood and gnawing on that person's flesh. Hiss! Blood zombie Ling Han frowned, and naturally thought of that evil thing. Wrong, 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 this isn't a blood zombie, but a second-tier bronze-armored corpse. A youngster dressed in black walked out of the dense forest, his face pale without the slightest hint of blood, giving off a feeling of being haunted in broad daylight. He still held 3 iron chains in his hands, all tightly stretched as if they were tied to something heavy, but couldn't be reached in the dense forest. 1,000 Corpse Sect. Ling Han frowned. What, you actually know about the 1,000 Corpse Sect? The black-clothed youngster stared at Ling Han, revealing a strong killing intent. Ling Han snorted, revealing a look of disgust. The Thousand Corpse sect was an extremely evil force. The people that came from this sect weren't strong themselves, but all of them would refine the corpses of elites as battle prowess, called corpse soldiers. They could command them with ease, and their battle prowess was extremely shocking. They divided the corpse soldiers into 3 major grades: bronze armored corpse, silver armored corpse, and gold armored corpse. Each grade was further divided into the first, second, and third grades. There were a total of 9 grades, corresponding to the 9 great realms of a martial artist, from the body refinement realm to the celestial being realm. Where did the corpse soldiers of the Thousand Corpse sect come from? They were obviously stolen from the corpses of martial artists, and the stronger a martial artist was when he was alive, the stronger the corpse soldiers made from them would be. A 3rd-tier golden armored corpse could even rival a heaven-tier elite. In order to steal the corpses of powerful cultivators, the Thousand Corpse sect could be said to be deranged. Not only did they dig up ancient tombs, they even dared to steal the corpses of powerful cultivators that had just been buried not too long ago. Thus, this sect attracted the disgust of a large number of people, and was once jointly attacked. Ling Han had initially thought that the Thousand Corpse sect had already been annihilated, and never thought that an heir would actually appear now. Chapter 223. However, Ling Han had just returned to the inn when he ran into a group of old friends. Qi Yongyi, Bailey Tingyun, Li Dongyu, as well as the descendants of the 8 great clans of the imperial city, such as Xiao Huan, Qian Wuyong, Huang Weizhe, and so on. These people would basically be the mainstays of Rain Country for the next 30 years. They had all heard that Ling Han had become an Earth-grade alchemist and asked around. After finding out that Ling Han was staying here, they came to pay a visit. An Earth-grade alchemist was too awesome, setting a precedent in Rain Country. Even if the Rain Emperor came in person, he was only fit to be on equal footing with Ling Han. Even a slightly weaker emperor would have to flatter Ling Han. Since that was the case, how could these youngsters not come to pay a visit and greet Ling Han when they knew he was here? What's more, if they could form a relationship with such a super alchemist, that would really be a huge gain. Grandmaster Ling, Qi Yongyi and the others said with a smile, not daring to directly call Ling Han by his name. Ling Han didn't take it to heart. He naturally didn't need to treat his friends as outsiders, but Qi Yongyi, Bailey Tingyun, and the others didn't pass his test, so they could only be said to be casual acquaintances. No matter how they called him, Ling Han wouldn't mind. However, Ling Han wouldn't be stingy, either. He took out the vegetables, fruits, and meat grown in the Black Tower to entertain them. There were still quite a few low-level demonic beasts inside, but if he wanted to entertain casual acquaintances, normal meat was enough. For a moment, everyone was fighting over plates, and the scene went out of control. The others in the inn thought they were going to fight, and almost ran to the Star Brilliance Palace Hall to call for help. After eating and drinking to their heart's content, as martial artists, everyone couldn't help but feel itchy. Ken Yi, you've actually reached the 9th layer of the Gushing Spring tier. Zhao Huan looked at Ken Yi with a bit of shock. Before this, he'd always firmly suppressed Ken Yi in terms of cultivation, but now he'd just broken through to the 7th layer of the Gushing Spring tier, yet Ken Yi had soared to the 9th layer of the Gushing Spring tier. How could he not be shocked? Ah! Qian Wuyong and the others also cried out in surprise. The path of martial arts was difficult, and one step required one footprint. It was indeed possible to have a leap in cultivation at a lower tier, but the higher the cultivation, the slower the advancement. Just like climbing a tall mountain, one could sprint at the beginning, but halfway up the mountain, one would be out of breath, and have to rest after a few steps. Ken Ye's advancement speed completely exceeded their expectations. Ken Ye didn't say a word, and remained cold as he lightly rubbed the saber's hilt. In his eyes, there was no person closer to him than a saber. Everyone was only shocked for a while, and immediately came to a sudden realization. Don't forget, Ken Ye was now following an Earth-grade alchemist. With an earth-grade alchemist using alchemical pills, how could cultivation not advance quickly? In reality, Ken Yi also had the qualifications to charge into the spiritual ocean tier, but he was the same as Ling Han. Because he advanced through alchemical pills, he had to first stabilize his tier. Blindly pursuing a higher tier was like pulling up seedlings to help them grow, and the repercussions would very quickly appear. If there was a situation where battle prowess couldn't keep up with one's tier, then what difference would there be from a cripple? Ken Yi, battle with me. Zhao Huan challenged. Previously, he had always been able to steadily suppress Ken Yi, but now that Ken Ye's tier had instead surpassed his, he wanted to battle even more to prove that he was the strongest genius of the imperial capital. Ling Han, Yan Tian Zhao, and Feng Yan were freaks, so be it. Ken Yi did not accept the battle, but shook his head, and said, "You are no match for me, and will be killed by me with a single strike." Zhao Huan couldn't help but be angry, but because Ling Han was present, it wasn't good for him to flare up. He only snorted, and said, 2 days later, it will be the martial arts tea party. I hope you won't be stingy with your battle then. Ken Yi was silent for a moment, pointed at Ling Han, and said, I am not the person you want to surpass, he is. Everyone was instantly speechless. Who didn't know that Ling Han was a freak? He defeated Yan Tian Zhao with a single strike, and crippled Feng Yan with a single palm strike. He was practically a monster. Moreover, this monster was also a big boss of alchemy, so who would dare challenge him? It wouldn't be good if they lost or won. Grandmaster Ling, are you also going to participate in the martial arts tea party the day after tomorrow? Qi Yongyi asked. Ling Han thought for a moment, and said, there's no harm in going. If Grandmaster Ling participates, then we can only stand to the side, Qian Wuyong said with a smile, giving Ling Han a little flattery. However, Grandmaster Ling, I beg of you, hurry up and increase your tier. We'll lose too much face if we keep being suppressed by you, a person in the first layer of Gushing Spring tier. Huang Weizhe also joked. This was also because Ling Han was young, or else if it was Fu Yuansheng, he definitely wouldn't dare to say such words. Ling Han couldn't help but smile. His Spring's Eye had already fused in advance, so whether it was the 3rd layer of Gushing Spring tier or the 9th layer of Gushing Spring tier, he'd still be in the 1st layer of Gushing Spring tier if he went up. He said, don't worry, I won't make a move the day after tomorrow. With such a good opportunity, he planned to sell the ginseng and Ganoderma in the Black Tower to the people of the 9 nations of the desolate north. This way, he could weaken the financial resources of his opponents competing for the blue-scale demonic fruit, and also increase his own wealth, naturally killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Grandmaster Ling, this is what you said. Everyone's eyes lit up. The strongest person in the 9 nations of the desolate north. Who wouldn't want to wear such a halo, but if Ling Han made a move, then others wouldn't have any hope at all, unless they could break through to the spiritual ocean tier. But how many spiritual ocean tier cultivators below 30 could there be? Only Feng Yan and Yan Tian Zhao, these 2 freaks. Ling Han smiled, and said, I said it, so don't worry, I only plan to sell some things. What kind of alchemical pill does Grandmaster Ling plan to sell? Everyone was curious. This young man had advanced to become an earth-grade alchemist, so the alchemical pill he would take out would definitely be shocking. You'll know the day after tomorrow. Ling Han kept it a secret. Though everyone was curious, they dared not ask Ling Han any further. They could only feel an itch in their hearts, but it was only 2 days anyways, so they'd just bear with it. The answer would be revealed the day after tomorrow. They ate until late at night, and only then did everyone leave. However, there were 2 people who stayed in this inn, so they could return to their own rooms with a few casual steps. 1 day, 2 days, time passed very quickly, and it was already the day of the martial arts tea party. The venue was set on the public square in the eastern part of the town. A huge pergola had been temporarily set up here, enough to seat several thousand people. And this time, though the younger generation of the 9 nations of the desolate north had all come, those who came were also the cream of the crop. No matter what, they would at least be in the level of element gathering tier. Thus, on average, each nation would be allocated a few hundred seats, and that was enough. The martial arts tea party would begin at noon and end at night. Ling Han, Lu Yutong, and the others arrived at the public square, and casually found a place to sit down. There were quite a few of them in their group, and they soon occupied a table. Hunyo could not sit still, and immediately took out the snacks that she had prepared long ago from her spatial ring, and began to eat very happily. Very soon, more and more people arrived, and even the star guards were mobilized to maintain order. After all, young people were hot-blooded, and it would not be good if someone died in a fight. Thank you, friends, for coming. I am grateful. Cheng Fei Jun appeared and said in a loud and clear voice, instantly causing most of the people to stand up. This was a black-grade high-level alchemist, and he could be considered a big shot in any nation, so how could they be disrespectful? Chapter 224. Ling Han looked at the third-tier bronze-armored corpse and frowned slightly. A third-tier bronze-armored corpse, even if he couldn't defeat it, wouldn't be able to kill him. Most importantly, it was pulling 3 coffins, which meant that there was still a corpse soldier that hadn't appeared. Or a bronze-armored corpse, or a silver-armored corpse. Even a first-tier silver-armored corpse was equivalent to a spiritual ocean tier elite. Ling Han was freakish, but not freakish enough to face a spiritual ocean tier warrior head-on. Moreover, corpse soldiers had no feelings, didn't fear death, and didn't fear injury. Unless their heads exploded, they wouldn't lose battle prowess, making them very difficult to deal with. More importantly, corpse soldiers were all forged. During this process, the bodies of corpse soldiers would become incomparably tough, comparable to forging materials of the same grade. How could they be broken through like this? Thus, to completely kill a corpse soldier, one needed to surpass a tier and completely shatter it with overwhelming power. Ling Han's current power was only comparable to the first layer of the gushing spring tier, and he couldn't even deal with a third-tier bronze-armored corpse, let alone a silver-armored corpse. Moreover, even if he could kill Rong Huanxian instantly, the corpse soldier wouldn't die with the controller's death. Instead, it would break free of control and kill based on instinct. However, Rong Huanxian was at the 5th layer of the gushing spring tier, not easy to kill. Ling Han cracked a smile, and said, "In your third coffin, there won't be a silver-armored corpse lying, right?" Rong Huanxian's expression changed slightly, and he snorted, saying, "You really know a lot about the Thousand Corpse sect." Without another word, Ling Han broke into a run, grabbing Hunyo with his left hand and Yang Ming with his right. Xiao, 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 they instantly became a small black dot. As expected, there was a silver-armored corpse. What was there to fight? Ah! Rong Huanxian was stunned, and then let out a sky-shaking roar. He didn't think that Ling Han would run so decisively. Trash! Trash! He roared angrily at the 2 corpse soldiers, but the corpse soldiers would only fight after he gave the order. Otherwise, if they had their own thoughts, he would probably be the first to be swatted to death and eaten. After a while, he calmed down and said to himself, "It's fine. That brat will definitely go to the central hall. I'll kill everyone there, and the 3 corpse soldiers should be able to advance. I heard that there are still blood zombies here, and their battle prowess is almost on par with flower blossom tier elites. If I can get my hands on 3 of them, hee. The blood zombie will only appear when the blood sacrifice is insufficient. If I kill everyone in the 4 central halls, the blood zombie will definitely appear." Ha, ha ha ha. He laughed maniacally. Ling Han only stopped after running for close to 100 miles in one go. He casually threw Yang Ming to one side, and then put Hunyo down. Yang Ming had probably never been treated so rudely before. The veins on his neck immediately bulged, and he revealed a furious expression. However, when he thought of the difference in power between him and Ling Han, he immediately suppressed this kind of anger. Young Master Han, the gorge is just ahead. Let's go quickly, he said impatiently. Ling Han nodded. The space in his dantian was extraordinarily large, and he had only expended less than 10% of his origin power to travel 100 miles in a single breath. Taking out a level 2 return origin pill, he would be able to recover very quickly. If others saw this, they'd definitely scold him for being a wastrel. Return origin pills were definitely taken in battle because you could usually meditate to recover, and there wouldn't be time to do so during battle. But who asked Ling Han to be rich and overbearing? What he didn't lack the least was alchemical pills, so he could take them casually. They were indeed closer to the gorge, and in a few minutes at most, they'd reach the entrance. Ling Han. Someone waved at them from afar, and there were quite a few of them. Upon closer inspection, it was Qi Yongyi and the others. Ling Han quickened his pace and walked over. Aside from Li Si-chan, Guang Yuan, and Li Hao, everyone else was here. Who is this? They looked at Yang Ming. I'm Yang Ming, a nobody. Yang Ming hurriedly cupped his hands in greeting, extremely modest. However, when his gaze swept past Lu Yutong, he couldn't help but be stunned. He couldn't help but take a few more glances before lowering his head again. This isn't the place to talk, let's go in first, Ling Han said seriously. Rong Huanxian could appear at any time behind them. Rong Huanxian wasn't a big deal, but he had a silver-armored corpse with him. In this place where spiritual ocean tier warriors ruled, the silver-armored corpse was practically invincible. Everyone saw his solemn expression and didn't object. They were all waiting for Ling Han's arrival anyway, and since the main character was here, why not leave? On the way, Ling Han told them about Rong Huanxian, making everyone's hair stand on end. Corpse soldier, they'd never heard of it, what the hell was that? The blood zombies here wouldn't be corpse soldiers, right? Bailey Tingyun guessed. It's possible. The others nodded. This could explain why Rong Huanxian appeared. Perhaps there was an inheritance of the Thousand Corpse sect here, and Rong Huanxian came to take it. Such an inheritance, I wouldn't want it even if it was God tier. Li Dongyu shook his head like a rattle drum. The others also shook their heads. Raising corpses, just thinking about it gave them goosebumps. If they really had to face it every day, they might vomit themselves to death. Guang Yuan hasn't arrived yet. Ling Han frowned. Among the people by his side, the only one who could stand against the silver-armored corpse was Guang Yuan. Without this brother blocking in front, whoever encountered the silver-armored corpse would be torn to shreds. Like the silver-armored corpse, it needed the flesh and blood of spiritual ocean tier warriors to evolve, so they didn't even qualify to be food. Senior Guang Yuan might have been transported to a place closer to the other canyon. Lu Yutong said, feeling a bit regretful, because spiritual ocean tier warriors were the strongest here. With him, their safety would increase a lot. Forget it, let's go. Along the way, after Yang Ming had a clear understanding of everyone's situation, he gradually became more active, calling everyone brothers. However, he didn't reveal his identity at all, and because of his relationship with Ling Han, the others didn't have any suspicions about him. This canyon looked like a sliver of sky from afar, but if you really walked inside, you'd definitely be shocked at the scale of the canyon. It was a few hundred miles long, and the width was about 2 miles. It was straight as if it was cut by a sharp weapon, there wasn't any place that was wider or narrower. A few hundred miles was naturally a piece of cake for poly-tier warriors. After half a day, they walked out of this long canyon, and a majestic palace appeared in front of them. When they first saw this palace, everyone revealed a shocked expression, because this building was actually floating in the air, and there were rows of stairs that were also suspended in the air, which was a marvelous sight. So magical. Chapter 225. A beautiful romance. Such a magical formation. As a former powerful warrior of heaven tier, Ling Han's focus was naturally different from others. Others were only shocked by this miraculous scene, but he had already discovered the reason why this palace was floating. Below the main hall was a square that was completely empty. However, this square was not simple at all. There were many veins that formed countless strange patterns that flickered faintly. And at the bottom of the palace, there were also corresponding veins, faintly glowing. Ling Han clicked his tongue in wonder. He'd seen many formations, but they were either used for defense or offense, and rarely this kind of anti-gravity type. This indeed looked spectacular, but for martial artists, it didn't seem to have any practical use. This was the central hall. Behind the main hall was a dense forest. It could be seen that someone had entered the forest, and his figure quickly disappeared. "Let's go to the central hall for the blood sacrifice first," Qi Yongyi said. He was considered half a member of the royal family, and the last thing he wanted was for Rain Country to be in chaos. This was the common thought of those with vested interests. Everyone nodded. If blood zombies really appeared, it wouldn't benefit anyone. They walked up the stairs, and there were more people here, not only from Rain Country, but also from Stone Country and Fire Country. However, the 9 nations had an unwritten rule, and that was that fighting was not allowed in the central hall. Letting the blood sacrifice proceed smoothly was the common interest of the 9 nations, and whoever broke this rule would become the common enemy of the 9 nations. Because this mystery realm opened 300 years ago, it was naturally everyone's first time here. Walking on the stairs, there was no one who didn't exclaim in surprise. Many people took a long time to move a step, shocked by this nature-defying method. Ascending step by step, the stairs under their feet hung in the air. The higher they went, the more uneasy they would feel, but at the same time, they would become excited, because other than flower blossom tier warriors who could fly in the sky and burrow into the earth, who could fly between heaven and earth? Although it wasn't flying now, there was a similar feeling. Standing above the 9 heavens, pointing at the rivers and mountains. Ling Han was also somewhat excited. No wonder they had to painstakingly make such a formation, this feeling was indeed very satisfying. However, in order to set up such a large formation, the materials needed should also be incomparably valuable. For small countries like Rain Country and Fire Country, even if they mobilized all the resources of their entire country, they still wouldn't be able to gather the materials. There were a total of 3,333 steps, but it took them nearly half an hour to reach the end. Firstly, it was too shocking as they walked. Secondly, there were too many people on the steps. Of course, it was not easy to squeeze all the way. The main hall finally appeared in front of them. It was a building without 4 walls, and a total of 12 giant stone pillars supported the roof. Each stone pillar was nearly 100 feet tall, making the main hall look incomparably magnificent. "Young master! Young master!" A voice filled with pleasant surprise rang out as 3 people squeezed out from the crowd. The one in the lead was an old man in his 60s with a powerful aura. "Uncle Fu." Yang Ming's eyes lit up, and his face immediately showed joy. He quickly greeted him. "Young master, are you all right?" Those 3 people looked at Yang Ming nervously. This was the young master of the Ao clan. If something happened to him, they would definitely pay with their lives. "I'm fine." Yang Ming smiled faintly and turned around, his temperament suddenly changing greatly. Previously, though he was friendly with everyone, he looked like a lackey, but now, he was filled with the bearing of a superior, as if an ugly duckling suddenly became a beautiful swan. "Everyone, allow me to introduce myself again." His gaze swept over everyone. "My surname is Ao, and my name is Yang Ming. I'm a direct disciple of the Winter Moon sect. Winter Moon sect in the vast lands, sects and countries could not be established as they pleased. For example, if there was only a spiritual ocean tier warrior overseeing, then it could only be called a faction. If there was a spiritual pedestal tier warrior overseeing, then it could establish a country, and sects were even higher. They had to have at least flower blossom tier cultivators. And the Winter Moon sect was the sect closest to the 9 nations of the desolate north. Legend had it that they had a spiritual infant tear cultivator in charge, and even the 9 nations of the desolate north had to treat them with respect. Otherwise, if the Winter Moon sect was dissatisfied, they could casually dispatch a few flower blossom tear cultivators to wipe out a country. And if a spiritual infant tear cultivator personally appeared, even if the flower blossom tear old monsters of the 9 nations joined forces, they could only be ruthlessly suppressed. The higher the tier, the more they couldn't afford a difference of half a tier, not to mention a difference of a large tier. Qi Yongyi and the others were shocked. The word direct indicated Ao Yang Ming's position in the Winter Moon sect. Such a person was even more precious than the eldest imperial prince and the third imperial prince. No wonder he had to conceal his identity all the way. He was definitely afraid that after it was revealed, people would covet his cultivation techniques and martial arts techniques. How precious were the secret techniques passed down from the Winter Moon sect. Now that Ao Yang Ming had the protection of his own family, he obviously had no more scruples. Surnamed Ao, Winter Moon sect. A chill flashed through Ling Han's eyes. This guy couldn't be related to Ao Feng, right? According to Ling Dongxing, Ao Feng was extremely dissolute and had countless illegitimate children, which was why his mother ran away from the marriage. It was completely possible that the person in front of him was Ao Feng's illegitimate child. Of course, he wouldn't rashly ask directly, and only revealed a faint smile. Qi Yongyi and the others hurriedly saluted. This was a direct disciple of a large sect. It didn't matter if they couldn't be friends, but they definitely couldn't have a falling out, or else it could bring disaster to the family. Ao Yang Ming was arrogant as expected, putting on an extremely high attitude. However, when he looked at Lu Yutong, his eyes immediately softened, and he said, "Lady Yutong, are you interested in joining our Winter Moon sect?" Joining the Winter Moon sect. Everyone was shocked, and revealed an envious expression. The Winter Moon sect, joining such a sect would give one the chance to advance into the spiritual pedestal tier, the flower blossom tier, and even become a spiritual infant tier cultivator. Of course, as long as Ao Yang Ming only invited Lu Yutong, one would know what this guy was planning. Indeed, Lu Yutong was one of the twin beauties of the imperial city, beautiful as a fairy, so it wasn't strange that Ao Yang Ming would fall for her. No. Lu Yutong did not even think about it and directly refused. She obviously knew that Ao Yang Ming chose her beauty, but even if he really valued her talent, she wouldn't agree. First, what cultivation technique was she cultivating now? Heaven grade. Would the Winter Moon sect give her a heaven grade cultivation technique to cultivate? Not to mention whether or not there was one, even if there was, they wouldn't easily pass it on to outsiders. Second, following Ling Han, she didn't have to worry about medicinal pills at all. That guy wasn't far from becoming an Earth-grade alchemist. Third, and most importantly, she didn't want to leave Ling Han. The third one would be able to suppress everything else. Ao Yang Ming was certain that Lu Yutong would agree, but he didn't expect her to refuse so readily, causing his expression to immediately become awkward. He looked at Ling Han and revealed a cold smile. Along the way, he obviously saw that Lu Yutong was interested in Ling Han. Then he'd first step on Ling Han until he was worthless. Chapter 226. Ao Yang Ming looked at Ling Han, a faint smile on his lips, and said, "Ling Han, you should return the ancient book I lent you before, right?" Baro Ling Han also smiled, and said with a hint of surprise, "Baro Yang Ming, did you forget? This is the price I paid for saving you. Also, you were calling me young Master Han just now, and now you're calling me by name. You've changed too quickly, haven't you?" Some things were unspoken rules. Everyone only needed to know in private, and couldn't be put on the table. Just like how Ao Yang Ming pretended to be a lackey, that was because he wasn't strong enough. If he still put on airs as a young master, it was guaranteed that he'd be destroyed in minutes. "Oh, you say you're a direct disciple of the Winter Moon sect, but show proof." Not to mention whether or not he could, since he offended a disciple of the Winter Moon sect, why not kill him and cause trouble for himself? He had made a name for himself through his pride, so he naturally had to keep a low profile previously. Everyone knew this, but Ling Han had exposed him in public, and was obviously not giving him any face. Ao Yang Ming's face instantly darkened, and the old man called Uncle Fu was even more murderous. He stepped out and said, "Young man, what nonsense are you talking about? If you speak without thinking again and slander my young master, I'll make sure your blood splatters 5 steps away." Hee hee. Ao Yang Ming pressed his hand lightly, and said, "Uncle Fu, Ling Han came all the way with me. He can talk nonsense, but I can't ignore old friendships. Yes, young master is magnanimous, this old servant admires." Uncle Fu bowed and said, looking very servile. This old man was at the spiritual ocean tier, and in this small world, he was a top-notch elite. Outside, as long as they revealed their identity as the Winter Moon sect, even spiritual pedestal tier elites would have to give them face. Qi Yongyi and the others frowned. This old man completely relied on Ao Yang Ming, and if Ao Yang Ming insisted on dealing with Ling Han, the situation wouldn't be good. This Ao Yang Ming was really shameless. Ling Han obviously saved him, but not only was he not grateful, he actually turned his gun against Ling Han. "Don't burn the bridge after crossing the river. You're just a typical villain." Ao Yang Ming looked at Ling Han once again, and said indifferently, "Ling Han, hand over the ancient book, and we'll still be friends. Otherwise." He didn't continue, but Uncle Fu revealed his ferocious expression, displaying the look of a dog slave to the fullest. Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, "When there's something going on, you call me young Master Han, and when there's nothing going on, you call me Ling Han. Could it be that you're a chameleon? Are you worthy of being called my friend?" Ao Yang Ming's expression changed. Uncle Fu took a step forward and was about to attack, but was stopped by Ao Yang Ming's outstretched hand. This young man's face was as cold as water, yet he looked towards Qi Yongyi and the others, saying, "Everyone, you've all seen Ling Han's true face, but do you still want to go all the way with him? This young master will give everyone a chance. Those who are willing to make a clean break with Ling Han, stand behind this young master. Otherwise, you'll be the Winter Moon sect's enemy." This label was too big. The Winter Moon sect's enemy, not to mention juniors like Qi Yongyi, even the leaders of the 8 great clans would feel a chill in their hearts. That was a super force with a spiritual infant tier cultivator, and just sending a flower blossom tier cultivator would be enough to cause a ruckus in Rain Country. Although Ao Yang Ming couldn't really represent the Winter Moon sect and send out a flower blossom tier cultivator for juniors like them, just that Uncle Fu behind him was enough to suppress them. Moreover, Ao Yang Ming could attack without restraint, but would Qi Yongyi and the others dare to harm a single hair on his head? If he didn't reveal his identity, then killing him was fine. No one would know, and there was no need to worry about the Winter Moon sect's revenge, but how many people were in the main hall now? Especially since there were martial artists of Fire Country here. They were extremely happy to have a conflict between Rain Country's people and the Winter Moon sect. It would be best if the Winter Moon sect's ultimate expert was drawn out, and they could wipe out Rain Country with a single hand. They could only take a beating and couldn't fight back. How could they fight such a battle? Ao Yang Ming sneered. He wanted to let Ling Han taste the feeling of being deserted, and then attack him physically, making him completely collapse. Qi Yongyi and the others were all hesitant, but Jin Wuji was the first to stand next to Ling Han, a resolute expression on his face. He was only able to be with Jiang Fei Yan because of Ling Han's great kindness. If he betrayed Ling Han now, then was he still human? Can Yi expressionlessly walked to Ling Han's side. He was trustworthy, and his promises were like mountains. Since he promised to be Ling Han's underling, then before he could kill Ling Han with one strike, he definitely wouldn't betray him. With these two people setting an example, Qi Yongyi and the others were obviously affected. Thinking that they were people of great status, and Ao Yang Ming dared to be so arrogant, would he kill them? With that thought, they all stood next to Ling Han, not leaving any face for Ao Yangming. Seeing them walk to Ling Han's side one by one, Ao Yangming's expression became more and more unsightly, and his eyes seemed like they were about to spit out flames. Were these people blind? They didn't want him, a direct disciple of the Winter Moon sect, and insisted on hugging Ling Han's thigh. He was indeed a bit strange. His battle prowess was very strong, but no matter how strong he was still in the poly tier. Good, good, good. Ao Yangming originally wanted Ling Han to be deserted by his own people to attack him, which would definitely make Ling Han lose control and embarrass him. This way, Lu Yutong's favorable impression of Ling Han would definitely drop. But now, the one who embarrassed himself was instead him. How could he endure this? Ling Han, you won't hand over my things, right? He said darkly, his murderous intent like a knife. Wrong. That's your money to buy your life. If you want me to hand it over, that's fine, but exchange it with your life, Ling Han said indifferently. As a former heaven tier elite, his pride was tougher than anyone else's. Not to mention that Ao Yangming was a disciple of the Winter Moon sect, and possibly Ao Feng's son, so he couldn't be polite. How dare you? Uncle Fu immediately shouted, glaring furiously and brimming with murderous intent. This time, Ao Yangming didn't stop him, and instead put his hands behind his back, appearing extremely pretentious. Uncle Fu understood, and walked towards Ling Han step by step. His speed was slow, but his murderous intent grew stronger and stronger. He did it on purpose to give Ling Han immense pressure, making this junior collapse under the pressure. Qi Yongyi and the others involuntarily took a few steps back. Although they stood on Ling Han's side, their friendship wasn't good enough to fight a spiritual ocean tier elite for Ling Han. This was suicide. Ling Han didn't have such a plan either. He had already prepared a swift cloud talisman, pasting it on and running at the crucial moment. Ah! Just as the smell of gunpowder filled the air, a cry of surprise suddenly came from below. A black shadow rushed into the crowd, and peng, peng, peng. The people nearby were shaken up like straw, broken limbs and fresh blood flying everywhere. Rong Huanxian's figure appeared. He was still dragging the 3 copper coffins, but the 3 corpse soldiers had already appeared and were on a killing spree. Chapter 227. Brother Zhong, get rid of him. That's right, get rid of him. We, the 9 nations of the desolate north, are not to be trifled with. The crowd became enraged, and Cheng Fei Jun, on the other hand, was silent. He recognized the symbol on Bao Xian Rant's sleeves. This was a disciple of a great sect, so it was not worthwhile for him to offend him. Anyways, it was just Zhong Higuang. If he died, then so be it. There were still plenty of geniuses here, so one less wouldn't matter. Ling Han frowned, and said, Zhong Higuang is in trouble. Why? Lu Yutong and Li Xichan both asked in shock. Because that brat is in the spiritual ocean tier, and in the 5th layer of the spiritual ocean tier at that. Guang Yuan continued. What? Lu Yutong and Li Xichan both revealed shocked expressions at the same time. A spiritual ocean tier martial artist in his 20s. What a joke, it was impossible to find such a person in the Rain country. There indeed appeared recently, and Feng Yan was one of them. And Yan Tian Zhao was even younger, only 15 years old. But normally speaking, one would have to be over 30 to be able to step into the spiritual ocean tier. In fact, reaching the gushing spring tier at 30 years old was already quite good. Could it be that the people of the North region were all so powerful, that any random person that came out was a martial arts genius? Then this battle cannot be fought. Zhu Wujiu stood up abruptly. This was an absolutely unfair battle. Ling Han nodded, and said, you go and stop it, and can you return? Yes. Zhu Wujiu hurriedly received the order and left, but it was already too late. Zhong Higuang was already unable to restrain his anger. With a wave of his whip, he lashed out at Bao Xian Ran. Shua, the long whip turned into a spirit snake, and as origin power surged, layers of ripples appeared in the air, which was extremely shocking. Yet Bao Xian Ran only smiled coldly, and pointed with the little finger of his left hand. With incredible accuracy, he pointed at the middle of the long whip, and an even stronger wave of origin power surged, and the long whip instantly softened as if it had been hit where it hurt. Zhong Higuang was shocked, and was just about to wave his whip to regain his composure, but Bao Xian Ran had already flown out. His speed was extraordinarily fast, and with a single movement of his feet, he had already appeared in front of Zhong Higuang, grinning. Zhong Higuang was extremely panic-stricken, and was about to abandon his whip to attack when Bao Xian Ran flicked a finger at his forehead. With a paw, his whole body was instantly sent flying, and when he was flying in midair, his head suddenly exploded, and red and white matter scattered everywhere. Hiss! Everyone was trembling in fear. This was one of the strongest prodigies of the 9 nations of the desolate north, but now, he was killed like a stray dog. How could they accept this? Their hearts were cold, and they were trembling in fear. Could it be that the north region was filled with monsters like this? Then why the hell would they go to the Winter Moon sect? Entering the sect would definitely have to experience fierce competition, and they would all die from a casual attack. They had come out to pursue a higher tier of martial arts, and not to throw their lives away. All of a sudden, many people had the thought of retreating. Don't you guys think that when a person's head explodes, it's the most beautiful? Bao Xian Ran said with a hint of intoxication, then his voice became cold, and he said, "You really surprise me. You stray dogs of the desolate north can actually be so beautiful when you die, it's really inconceivable." This was not praise. Everyone was furious, but when they thought of the others' terrifying strength, none of them dared to make any noise. "You're not in the gushing spring tier," Chu Shui said. Zhong Higuang was in the 9th spring of the gushing spring tier, and no gushing spring tier martial artist would be able to kill him in 2 moves. Only spiritual ocean tier martial artists had such qualifications. Pa, 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 Bao Xian Ran began clapping his hands, and said with a smile, "Finally, there's a smart person. I obviously can't be in the gushing spring tier. A genius like me is already 25 years old, so how could I still be trash in the gushing spring tier?" Spiritual ocean tier, everyone exclaimed in shock, and at the same time, became incomparably furious. "You, an elite of the spiritual ocean tier, came here to torture and kill a gushing spring tier martial artist? What did this mean?" Bao Xian Ran stamped his foot, and a pattern opened up, forming a light green symbol. Releasing martial intent was the sign of the spiritual ocean tier. "Sir, you've gone too far. As a dignified spiritual ocean tier martial artist, you actually hid your cultivation level and killed people at every turn. Don't you think you've gone too far?" Bai Yuquan said in a powerful voice. "Well said, well said." Everyone cheered for him. Even a spiritual ocean tier martial artist couldn't bully others like this. What's more, it wasn't as if there were no spiritual ocean tier martial artists in the 9 nations of the desolate north. Bao Xian Ran picked his ear, and said, "What do you mean by going too far? I'm about the same age as you guys, my cultivation level is higher, and I'm stronger than you guys. This is because my talent is higher, and you guys are just trash. As trash, you should have the awareness to be stepped on by me. Too despicable. Let's attack together. At most, a few dozen people will die, but we have to kill him no matter what. That's right, we, the 9 nations of the desolate north, are not to be trifled with." Bao Xian Ran's provocation finally caused everyone to successfully suppress their fear, leaving only endless fury. No matter what, they had to kill this arrogant guy to vent their anger. "Oh, kill me." Bao Xian Ran sneered, raised his left hand high up, and circled around the crowd. He said, "Trash, have you noticed this emblem? This is the Cold Water Sect's emblem, and I am precisely a disciple of the Cold Water Sect. Putting aside whether you guys can kill me or not, even if you can, not only will you guys die, the clans behind you will also die, and your country will also be destroyed. Because I am a disciple of the Cold Water sect. Do you understand, you trash? Bao Xian Ran was proud, and put down his left hand. Now, is there any trash that is not convinced? All of a sudden, the crowd once again fell silent. A single spiritual ocean tier cultivator was obviously nothing much. United as one, they could still fight to the death no matter what. But for the Cold Water sect to be able to be called a sect, they had at least a spiritual infant tier elite keeping watch, and that was an unimaginable power. No matter how hot-blooded one was, he would still have to consider the clan behind him and the country. What kind of disaster would it be to attract such a colossal force like the Cold Water sect? Now, all of you scram back to your kennels. Whoever dares to leave the Fallen Moon Gorge, I'll behead him. Bao Xian Ran said coldly. This time, everyone finally knew that he was purposely here to stop them from entering the North region. At this critical juncture, there were only two possibilities. The first was that Bao Xian Ran did not want them to participate in the auction tomorrow, and the second was that he did not want them to participate in the Winter Moon Sect's entrance examination. Or it could be both. What are you still hesitating for? Bao Xian Ran glared. His own strength was enough to crush them, and added with the colossal force like the Cold Water sect standing behind him, he naturally had the confidence to be arrogant. Damn it! Everyone clenched their fists tightly, so much so that even their bones made cracking sounds. Could it be that so many of them could only return home with their tails between their legs because of a single youngster? That's right. I seem to have heard just now that there were many hundred-year-old ginsengs and Lingji here. Bao Xian Ran revealed a smile, greed flashing past his eyes. Before you leave, leave the ginsengs, Lingji, and origin power crystals behind. If anyone dares to keep them, kill them without mercy. The crowd was in an uproar. Chapter 228. You guys go first. Ling Han said to Qi Yongyi and the others. What about you? Lu Yutong hurriedly asked. Ling Han smiled and said, I can't leave for now, but I'll catch up to you guys soon. Ha ha ha, you can't leave. Rong Huanxian's hoarse voice came from the bronze coffin. All of you will die and become food for my corpse soldiers. Ling Han pretended not to hear and said, I won't have any worries if you guys leave. Only then did Qi Yongyi and the others nod and leave. They did not know why, but they believed Ling Han's words without the slightest doubt. It was as if this youngster had an indescribable charisma that caused them to involuntarily do as he said. Previously, part of the reason why they had supported Ling Han so strongly was also because of this kind of charisma. Kill them, don't let a single one escape. Rong Huanxian shouted from the bronze coffin. The silver-armored corpse immediately abandoned Uncle Fu and stood guard at the exit, slaughtering those who wanted to escape. It had the battle prowess of the spiritual ocean tier, even reaching 9 stars. Although it couldn't use martial arts, it had a sharp weapon like corpse poison, so its destructive power wasn't reduced at all. It was even more effective against people of lower tiers, killing a large group with a single sweep. Stop it! A few spiritual ocean tier elites all shouted. The juniors here were all people of their country, and it also involved the issue of blood sacrifice. If they provoked the blood zombie, then it would really be a big problem. The 8 spiritual ocean tier warriors joined hands against the silver-armored corpse and said, Everyone, leave the main hall immediately. If you meet other people on the way, tell them to go to the other central halls. With these 8 people blocking the silver-armored corpse, the others finally got a chance and dashed out of the hall. Go! Ling Han said to Lu Yutong. If you don't go, I won't go either. Lu Yutong said, gritting her teeth. Humph, quite affectionate. Ao Yang Ming sneered. Uncle Fu, take them all down. Yes, young master. Uncle Fu hurriedly nodded and stared coldly at Ling Han, pressing forward step by step. Time to go. Hold me. Ling Han hugged Hunyo with one hand and called out to Lu Yutong. Lu Yutong's beautiful face flushed red, but she did not hesitate to hug Ling Han. She could smell the strong masculine scent emanating from Ling Han's body, and she could feel her heart thumping wildly, as if it was about to jump out of her throat. Go. Where else do you think you're going? Uncle Fu sneered. He had already blocked off the exit of the palace hall, so how could it be that Ling Han still wanted to force his way through? Ling Han sprinted, and in a few steps, he had already arrived at the edge of the main hall. This place had no walls on all sides, and he could jump out from any side. However, only the entrance had a flight of stairs, and as for the other 3 sides, sorry, that was a height of over 1,000 meters, and below them was a hard rock plaza. Jumping down from such a height would only result in death. This old servant understands. Uncle Fu sprinted to the edge of the hall and reached out with one hand, turning it into a giant hand of origin power, grabbing at Ling Han with incredible speed. This old servant understands. Uncle Fu scuttled to the edge of the hall and reached out with one hand, turning it into a giant hand of origin power, grabbing at Ling Han with incredible speed. A spiritual ocean tier warrior was a spiritual ocean tier warrior, after all. With a wave of his hand, he caught up to Ling Han. Seeing this, Lu Yutong gritted her teeth and revealed a determined expression. Ling Han saw this and hurriedly said, "Don't act recklessly." But Lu Yutong acted as if she had not heard anything, and pushed at Ling Han with both hands. Xiao, Ling Han's descent accelerated, while she charged towards that large hand. Ding, she unsheathed her long sword and slashed at the giant hand of origin power. However, the difference in power between them was really too great. That gigantic hand of origin power only needed to clench its fist, and Lu Yutong was instantly caught. Merely with this slight obstruction, Ling Han had already surpassed the limit that the gigantic hand of origin power could reach, and had no choice but to drag Lu Yutong back. Pa, Uncle Fu casually threw Lu Yutong to the ground and said to Ao Yang Ming, "This old servant is useless, please punish me, young master." "No matter, that guy is definitely going to die." Ao Yang Ming sneered. He only cared about Lu Yutong. So what if Ling Han was smashed to pieces? The ancient records wouldn't be broken anyway, so he could just pick up the corpse when the time came. However, an expression of astonishment immediately appeared on his face. That was because the rapidly falling Ling Han had actually opened up a large umbrella, and the speed of his descent immediately slowed down. He was like cotton wadding floating in the air, and was falling towards the forest in the distance. This time, even if Uncle Fu immediately ran out of the palace to chase, with this detour, Ling Han would have long fallen into the forest. That was a natural barrier. How could he find Ling Han? Damn it! He immediately roared, but when his gaze swept past Lu Yutong, the corner of his mouth revealed a cold smile. With this hostage in hand, he wasn't afraid that Ling Han would keep hiding and not come out. In the distance, Ling Han's gaze seemed to be able to penetrate space, staring at Ao Yang Ming's face. At this moment, he was filled with a strong killing intent. Ao Yang Ming couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart, but he immediately thought that with his status, there was no need to be afraid of a brat like this, and instantly straightened his back. Ling Han mouthed a few words, and without another glance, his figure had already fallen into the forest. You don't care about your life for him, but he didn't even look at you, Ao Yang Ming said to Lu Yutong. At this time, he naturally had to sow discord. Lu Yutong was unmoved, and only sneered at Ao Yang Ming, saying, "He will come and save me." "Oh, why would he come and save you?" Ao Yang Ming sneered. "A mere politeer." Lu Yutong didn't say anything else, as if she was looking down on Ao Yang Ming. Ao Yang Ming was furious, and just as he was about to flip out, he heard Uncle Fu say, "Young master, it's dangerous here, let's leave first." Ao Yang Ming could only nod, and say, "Let's go." The group left the main hall, and could still hear the sounds of the 8 spiritual ocean tier warriors and the silver-armored corpses' fierce battle from afar. They couldn't help but look worried. Ling Han put away the blood-sucking origin gold, and walked forward with a gloomy expression. Hun Yo felt the anger hidden under Ling Han's calm expression, and bared her teeth in anger, as if she was going to bite someone. I have to save the little female attendant, but if I go like this, it's the same as throwing my life away. Ling Han thought as he walked. The only way is to break through to Gushing Spring Tier. At that time, I'll get a chance for Black Tower's power boost and possess the power of the first layer of the spiritual ocean tier. Then, I'll find a chance to activate 10,000 techniques return to 1, and kill that old dog with one strike. 10,000 techniques return to 1, practiced to the extreme, was to combine 10,000 sword strikes into one strike. That was enough for Ling Han to kill someone of a higher tier. However, the origin power required for this move was too terrifying, and Ling Han couldn't possibly use it right now. However, if he had the power of the spiritual ocean tier, then it definitely wouldn't be a problem. No matter what, I have to break through to Gushing Spring Tier. Ling Han made up his mind, found a hidden place in the dense forest, and began to accumulate the last bit of power. The origin nucleus in his dantian hadn't reached its limit yet, but it would need at most 3 days. Now that he began to attack with all his might, it was possible for him to reach the true limit of the poly tier within 2 days. 2 days, he only needed 2 days. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 229. Ling Han charged his cultivation with all his might, and Hun Yo seemed to be stimulated as well. She didn't make a fuss and started cultivating as well. Both of them were freaks. In just 2 days, Ling Han reached the peak of poly tier, and Hun Yo reached the peak of the 7th layer of poly tier, not far from Ling Han. Breakthrough. Ling Han took out a few medicinal pills and tossed them into his mouth. He didn't need to comprehend his cultivation level. As long as he had enough energy to support it, the door to Gushing Spring Tier would open for him. Breakthrough. Hun Yo said in a sweet voice, and started charging towards the 8th layer of poly tier in a dignified manner. In Ling Han's body, there was an earth-shattering change happening. The increase of a small tier was only the difference of one more origin nucleus. Even if he reached the 10th layer of poly tier and fused 9 large origin nuclei into one super origin nucleus, it was still a change of origin nucleus. But from poly tier to Gushing Spring Tier, it was a qualitative change, a completely new change. Turning the origin nucleus into a spring of origin power, spewing out origin power. With this step, a martial artist's power would increase tenfold. Power wasn't battle prowess, but it was the core component of battle prowess. Without the support of a powerful power, how could one form overwhelming battle prowess? Ling Han had enough comprehension of cultivation level, so breaking through to Gushing Spring Tier should be a piece of cake. However, the truth was not so. That was because he only had one origin nucleus. His experience was based on the breakthrough of 9 origin nuclei in his last life, but now it became 1, which was completely different. All his experience became useless. However, comprehension of cultivation level was still useful, but the method needed to be changed. The method was actually the same, liquefying the origin nucleus into a spring, but the difference was that if he broke through with 9 origin nuclei, he could use the other 8 nuclei as support. But now that he only had 1, the source of power became a problem. He couldn't use his own power, so he could only crazily swallow medicinal pills. Ling Han waved his hands and continuously swallowed the medicinal pills. The medicinal power worked in his body, forming a tsunami-like power. One after another, a mysterious power surged into Ling Han's body. This was because his cultivation level had reached the required level, and his comprehension was also sufficient. The heaven and earth resonated, causing his origin nucleus to continuously soften, as if it was rippling water. The power of heaven and earth was used, and now it was up to him. Melt for me. Ling Han waved the 5 elements chaos lotus and absorbed the surrounding spiritual qi. Added with the power of the alchemical pill, it continuously bombarded the origin nucleus, attempting to liquefy it and turn it into the mouth of the spring, the source of power. This step was very difficult, because unlike normal element gathering tier martial artists who had the help of the other 8 cores, it was much easier in comparison. But now, he could only rely on alchemical pills and spirit base to absorb the power, which was really too little. But who asked him to break through to 10 nuclei? This gave him great power, so he naturally had to pay a corresponding price. Shua, 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 Ling Han not only swallowed medicinal pills, but also took out the 4 transformations pill that could only be used by gushing spring tier to increase cultivation level, to provide the terrifying energy needed to liquefy the super origin nucleus into a spring. Other people's origin nuclei turned into a spring one after another, and the last one was at the 9th layer of gushing spring tier. At that time, there would be 8 origin power springs to provide power, and one only needed to comprehend the cultivation level. The energy needed was a piece of cake. However, this one origin nucleus of Ling Han was actually bigger than the 9 origin nuclei of the others put together. Moreover, it was not just a little bit bigger, because every large origin nucleus of his was composed of 5 small origin nuclei, so there was a total of 45 origin nuclei. The energy needed was like an ocean. Eat, eat, eat. Ling Han continuously swallowed 4 transformations pill. Pa, 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 under the impact of the violent energy, his skin cracked, his blood vessels burst open, and large amounts of blood seeped out. 4 transformations pill was used by gushing spring tier to increase cultivation level, and taking it now was practically suicide. Even the body of dead tree couldn't withstand such an impact. Lone Wolf's blood, activated indestructible heaven scroll, activated. His body was rapidly recovering, but at the same time, he was continuously injured by the violent medicinal impact. Such pain wasn't something an ordinary person could bear, but Ling Han didn't even frown, only gritting his teeth and bearing it. How could it be a smooth road to climb to the peak of martial art? If he couldn't even bear this bit of pain, what was there to talk about shattering the void and becoming a god? Moreover, the greater the difficulty of breaking through, the greater the power that could be obtained after breaking through. This was obviously proportional. This time, the Black Tower didn't help, and only floated lightly in his dantian, with a strange light surging. Ling Han was neither joyful nor sorrowful. He merely continued to attack. Dripping water could penetrate stone, and under his continuous efforts, the origin nucleus finally began to liquefy. Pa, the entire origin nucleus dissolved, turning into a small spring with origin power surging and spewing out origin power. Success! Ling Han didn't stop. The spring had just opened, and he needed to stabilize his tier, or else this spring would quickly dry up and turn back into an origin nucleus, returning to the poly tier. But at this step, there was no difference from a normal gushing spring tier. Expanding the spring to the limit, the next step would be to form a sea of origin power, and that was the spiritual ocean tier. Other people needed to transform origin nuclei into spring eyes, then link 9 spring eyes into one, expanding into a sea, but Ling Han only had 1 origin nucleus, and could only form 1 spring eye, so how would his tier be calculated? Ling Han couldn't help but think that he'd probably always be treated as the first layer of gushing spring tier. Who cares? What I need is strength. The mouth of the spring opened and continued to expand, only stopping when Ling Han's soul power was exhausted. Gushing spring tier when, the Black Tower spun lightly, as if it was releasing some kind of signal. Countless veins on the tower's body shone, forming one ancient character after another. He could not understand them, but they contained an indescribable and profound mystery, engraved eternally. Ling Han was excited. Was the Black Tower finally going to open its doors to him and reveal all its secrets? For him, there was nothing more he desired than to understand the secrets of the Black Tower, because this lord killed him in his last life and left him in a state that he couldn't understand for 10,000 years. It would be strange if he didn't worry about this. Xiao, Ling Han felt his divine sense twitch slightly, and found himself in an unfamiliar space. This place was very much like a farmland, because there were patches of mud on the ground, but there was no place for plants, making it look very barren. The sky was very high, but there was no sun, nor were there any clouds, a bit like the sky of a mystery realm. Where was this? Why did he suddenly come here? Ling Han was surprised. He raised his hand to touch his face, feeling extremely real. In other words, he wasn't in a state of divine sense. How was this possible? Ling Han was a bit confused. Did he suddenly teleport here by the Black Tower? The Black Tower could teleport. Chapter 230. When a small black tower appeared, floating in front of Ling Han. Black Tower. Ling Han couldn't help but sigh. Since seeing the Black Tower 10,000 years ago, this was the second time he saw it with his own eyes, making him sigh as if he'd lived 2 lives. Wrong, I'm not the Black Tower you saw 10,000 years ago, but the spirit of the Black Tower. This small tower seemed to be able to hear Ling Han's thoughts, and actually swayed lightly, sending out a thought that directly entered Ling Han's consciousness. What? Ling Han was shocked, and said, "You're the spirit of the tool, then where am I?" "Of course inside the Black Tower," Small Tower said. Ling Han was a bit confused, and said, "The Black Tower is in my dantian, but I'm inside the Black Tower, how is that possible?" "Look at your dantian again," Small Tower said. Ling Han looked inside his dantian, but found that it was already empty, without the existence of the Black Tower. "You entered inside the Black Tower, so the Black Tower is naturally in your original world," Small Tower said indifferently. In reality, its tone was flat, without a trace of emotion. "Who knew?" Ling Han was shocked. He had seen the size of that Black Tower before, and it even possessed supreme might. A flash of light was enough to kill him, who was in the heaven tier in his last life, and Hun Yo was meditating right next to him. Would she be directly crushed to death? Even if she wasn't crushed to death, with the little girl's wild nature, she'd definitely pounce and bite fiercely, and the consequences would be unthinkable. "Don't worry, after you enter the Black Tower itself will turn into a grain of sand in the vast ocean, no different from dust, and no one can think of anything different," Small Tower said with a tone of a dead person. Ling Han breathed a sigh of relief, then patted his head, and ridiculed, "Why did a spirit suddenly come out to talk to me? I didn't find it strange at all." "Wait, you mean, I'm inside the Black Tower?" Ling Han suddenly reacted. "Yes," Small Tower said calmly. Ling Han instantly opened his mouth wide, and said, "How is this possible? Since the Black Tower can turn into a speck of dust and still have a tool spirit, that means it's a spirit tool. In that case, the space it forms should be the same as a spatial ring. How can it store living things? The space here has formed a world of its own, so it's only natural that living creatures can be collected." "What's so strange about that?" Small Tower asked calmly. Ling Han was surprised at first, but then a look of wild joy appeared on his face. The Black Tower could contain living creatures, and it could also transform into a speck of dust. What did this mean? As long as he encountered danger, he could enter the Black Tower, just like how Rong Huanxian could hide in the copper coffin. The difference was that the internal space of the Black Tower was who knew how many times larger. Furthermore, it could also be infinitely small, so enemies would not know what was happening at all, and would only think that he could teleport. Divine item, this was definitely a divine item. He had never heard of a space container that could not only contain living things, but could also change its size. Also, he's wearing a space ring. One had to know that space containers could not be stacked together, which meant that one space container could not be stored in another space container. But now that he was inside the Black Tower, he was still wearing a space ring, which meant that the two could be stacked together. "Can I bring others in?" Ling Han asked. "Yes." "How do you do it?" Small Tower transmitted a thought to Ling Han, teaching him how to bring other things, including living people and living creatures, into the Black Tower. The key was that if it was a living creature, it couldn't have the thought of resisting, or else he could only first knock the other party unconscious. Xiao, Ling Han's figure flashed, and he already appeared in the forest outside. Hun Yo was looking around blankly, and when Ling Han appeared, she immediately pounced on him, and said, "Why couldn't Yo find you just now?" Ling Han laughed mischievously, and said, "I'll bring you to a place, don't resist." "Oh." Hun Yo nodded, not really understanding. Ling Han grabbed Hun Yo, and with a thought, he and Hun Yo had already appeared inside the Black Tower according to the divine sense that Small Tower had transmitted over. Wah! Hun Yo revealed a surprised expression, and couldn't help but spread out her arms, running in this spacious world. As she ran, she giggled, extremely cheerful. "Can you see what's strange about this little girl?" Ling Han asked Small Tower. Small Tower trembled lightly, as if shaking its head, and said, "I suffered a great injury, and no longer have any memories of the past." "What?" Ling Han exclaimed in shock. The Black Tower shook lightly, and he, a former elite of Heaven tier, was turned into ashes. However, this kind of god tool was actually heavily damaged, and even its past memories no longer existed. Then, who could have caused this? "I have a vague feeling that my existence will attract many people's greed, so before you have absolute strength, you must not reveal my secret," Small Tower said indifferently. Ling Han nodded. Not to mention the Black Tower, just the indestructible Heaven Scroll was extremely important, and he wouldn't reveal any secrets even if he was beaten to death. "However, you're really called the Black Tower?" he asked. Small Tower trembled lightly, and said, "I've already lost all memories, even forgotten my name." Ling Han couldn't help but feel depressed. He originally thought that after breaking through to Gushing Spring Tier, he could understand the secrets of the Black Tower, but he didn't think that other than an additional castle that could be carried, there didn't seem to be any other changes. Of course, this castle was enough to make Shattering Void Tier elites jealous, and obtain it at all costs. The Black Tower has a total of 9 floors, and as long as your strength is sufficient, you can open them accordingly. Each floor has different functions, Small Tower said. Ling Han immediately revealed a happy expression, and said, "What functions do they have?" "I've already lost my memories, so I can only obtain the relevant information after you open a floor of the tower," Small Tower said unhurriedly. "So, I can only tell you the functions of this floor now." It paused, and said, "The first floor is a medicinal garden. The spirit herbs planted here, 1 year is equivalent to 1,000 years. Pooh! Ling Han instantly spluttered. 1 year was equivalent to 1,000 years, then if I wanted a 1,000-year-old ginseng, wouldn't I only have to wait for a year? I have a vague memory, and after opening an unknown floor of the tower, I can still accelerate, Small Tower added. Ling Han almost jumped up. There were 2 problems that troubled alchemists. First, the level of alchemy. You couldn't have an Earth-grade alchemist concoct a Heaven-grade medicinal pill. Second, the ingredients. The cleverest housewife couldn't cook without rice, and a Heaven-grade alchemist couldn't concoct a yellow-grade medicinal pill out of thin air. And the higher the grade of the medicinal pill, the higher the requirements for the spirit herbs, frequently requiring 100 or 1,000 years old, and some top-grade spirit herbs even needed to be 10,000 years old. There were only so many spirit herbs in the world, and after being picked from generation to generation, there were so many 1,000 years old and 10,000 years old. There were too few 100 years old. But the Black Tower could easily solve this problem. Spirit herbs planted here for 1 year was equivalent to 1,000 years in the outside world, and after opening a certain floor, it could even accelerate. Defying nature, an absolute divine tool. Chapter 231. Cheng Fei Jun had organized this martial arts tea party to, on one hand, select geniuses and have Luo Jifeng recruit them. On the other hand, he also wanted to establish his personal prestige. When the time came, he would show himself and use his status as a black-grade high-level alchemist to naturally convince others to join him. But now, Qing Fei Jun had been completely forgotten in a corner, while Ling Han had obtained everyone's approval and gratitude. This really made Qing Fei Jun seethe with anger. Who asked him to shrink back at such a crucial moment? In the world of martial arts, even if one's ability was weak, if one fought to the death, others would still give him a thumbs up and call him a good man. But fleeing without a fight and being afraid to fight in public was the most despised act. Ling Han clasped his fists in greeting, then brought Lu Yutong and the others back to the inn. On the way back, Lu Yutong and the others were still unsatisfied, saying that since Ling Han had obtained first place, he should have asked Qing Fei Jun to hand over that restore heart pill. This caused Ling Han to laugh loudly, and was even more disdainful of them. To think that he, the mighty alchemy emperor, would still have to eat a second-grade remnant pill concocted by a black-grade high-level alchemist? What a joke! Not long after returning to the inn, customers swarmed in like clouds. Zhu Wujiu was already too busy, so Guang Yuan and Ken Yi both went to help. Later, not only did the younger generation of the 9 nations of the desolate north come with origin crystals, even many alchemists from the Star Brilliance Pavilion rushed over upon hearing the news. Those who had not broken through to the flower blossom tier were all mortals, and mortals only had a lifespan of 100 years. Who wouldn't want to live a few more years? The more powerful the elderly were, the more they cherished their lives. For the sake of living a few more years, they were really willing to pay any price. Though the effects of 100-year-old ginseng and Ganoderma were not nature-defying, they could still prolong one's lifespan, and living 3 to 5 more years was definitely not a problem. Moreover, these things were very nourishing and could heal internal injuries, which was equivalent to prolonging one's lifespan. Lu Yutong and Li Si-chan became the housekeepers, happily counting the origin crystals on one side, yet Hun Yo looked down on them. She thought to herself, these 2 silly girls, what's so good about origin crystals? They should be sticking to Ling Han. After a day of selling, Ling Han earned a shocking 100,000 origin crystals. This was a fortune that would make one envious, and it was guaranteed that even the imperial family of Rain Country would at most take out a fraction of it. The auction was nearing, and it would begin in 2 days. On the other side, with the help and urging of the 3 Earth-grade alchemists, Ling Han's alchemist certification would soon be completed. At most, it would take another 5 days, and his proof of identity would be sent over. Ling Han was very satisfied, and began to consider where he should go next. The Star Brilliance Palace Hall was only a transit station for him to leave the desolate north, so it was naturally impossible for him to stay here for a long time. He would also take the opportunity to certify as an Earth-grade alchemist, giving him a guarantee that he could do as he pleased. Now that these 2 matters were almost completed, the next step would naturally have to be put on the agenda. The Winter Moon sect was going to open its doors and accept disciples. After Ling Han heard this news from others, he considered for a while, and decided to go to the Winter Moon sect. Firstly, he wanted to inquire about his mother's whereabouts. Secondly, he wanted to collect some interest. For a large sect like the Winter Moon sect, they definitely had their own medicinal garden. Ling Han planned to empty out their medicinal garden to enrich the space inside the Black Tower. Who asked this sect to capture his mother and injure his father? If he didn't take revenge, how could he still be considered a human? When he had enough strength, he would naturally kill Ao Feng and settle this grudge. And he would go to the Winter Moon sect. However, he had to hide his identity. Otherwise, with his identity as Feng Yan's mortal enemy, even if that spiritual infant tier elite didn't kill him with his status as an Earth-grade alchemist, he would still be chased out. How would he be able to collect the Winter Moon sect's medicinal garden then? Because they had spent all their origin crystals and the martial arts tea party was over, many young people did not wait for the auction to begin. They directly set out on their journey, heading towards the Winter Moon sect. However, among these people who had set out, some actually made a detour after walking for a short distance. They deliberately went to see Ling Han and told him a piece of news. On their way, they noticed a few young people coming from the direction of the north region. Could it be the likes of Bao Xian Ren again? Ling Han thanked them, and these people once again set out on their journey. Ling Han could not help but feel rueful. He had killed Bao Xian Ren only because the latter had infringed on his interests, and had not considered too much. However, the result was that he had gained the hearts of many people. Otherwise, they would have already left, so why would they deliberately come back to tell him? But from the fact that they could leave freely, it could be deduced that these new outsiders should be different from Bao Xian Ran. Otherwise, they should have tried to kill them halfway, and not allowed them to leave. Could it be that they had come to participate in the auction? This was very possible. After all, there would be at least one blue-scale demonic fruit for sale this time, so it was very normal that it would attract people from nearby. In the middle of the night, that feeling of being watched came again. Ling Han knew that Luo Jifeng had definitely stared at him again. It was not the first time that this old guy had done something like this. However, under Ling Han's eye of truth, he had nowhere to hide. However, Ling Han very quickly revealed a solemn expression, because Luo Jifeng was actually wearing a mask today. He was hiding his face, so it was obvious that he was about to do something bad. Obviously, Ling Han had not given him the chance to make a move all this while, and finally, the old guy could no longer hold back his temper, and decided to make a move even if it was in the inn. Ling Han hesitated internally. Should he immediately hide inside the Black Tower? If he hid inside the Black Tower, then he would definitely be absolutely safe. However, he still had one more chance for the power boost from the Black Tower. Moreover, he was currently in the 9th layer of the Gushing Spring tier, and as long as he could strengthen his foundation to an unshakable level, he would attempt to break through to the Spiritual Ocean tier. If he did not use it now, it would be equivalent to wasting an opportunity. Most importantly, the power boost from the Black Tower was also a process of tempering his body, which was very beneficial to him. Thus, he definitely could not miss it. Small Tower had also said that the later the chance for power boost, the better it would be. He was now in the 9th layer of the Gushing Spring tier, and could not wait any longer. With the power boost, he could possess the cultivation level of the 9th layer of the Spiritual Ocean tier, and with his freakish battle prowess, the 9th layer of the Spiritual Ocean tier was enough to battle against a Spiritual Pedestal tier elite. Though the higher the cultivation level, the harder it was to battle against someone of a higher cultivation level. Battling against someone in the 2nd or 3rd layer of the Spiritual Pedestal tier should not be a problem. After all, Luo Jifeng was only in the 3rd layer of the Spiritual Pedestal tier. If he used the mysterious 3000 at full power, he would definitely have the chance to insta-kill him. After making his decision, Ling Han immediately moved quietly and left the inn, fleeing towards a dark place in the distance. With the senses of Luo Jifeng's Spiritual Pedestal tier divine sense, he naturally discovered Ling Han's departure at the first instant. The old man could not help but be slightly startled. How could it be so coincidental? Just as he was prepared to kill Ling Han even if he had to expose his identity, this brat actually left the inn by himself, creating an opportunity for him. Strange. However, he could not resist such temptation no matter what. In his mind, a mere martial artist in the 1st layer of the Gushing Spring tier could not possibly pose a threat to him. The old man leaped and also flew away, following closely behind Ling Han. He planned to catch up to him in a remote area and kill Ling Han. Firstly, he would solve a problem for Cheng Fei Jun, and secondly, he would have to extract the strange fire. Otherwise, Cheng Fei Jun would definitely not be able to seize the position of the ruler of the Star Brilliance Palace Hall. After a mere 10 minutes or so, Ling Han suddenly stopped. This was the plaza where the martial arts tea party had been held yesterday. There was still a large number of pergolas that had not been torn down. The surroundings were completely dark, as if it were a ghost town. This was really a good place to kill, it was so spacious. Chapter 232. Lu Yutong only sneered. Eating, sleeping, and traveling, she was very cooperative. She didn't go on a hunger strike or refuse to travel, but she wouldn't say a word if she could avoid talking, making Ao Yangming depressed like a tiger trying to bite a tortoise, not knowing where to start. He was interested in Lu Yutong, and wanted to use identity, status, and strength to move Lu Yutong, but Lu Yutong didn't have his existence in her eyes at all, making him mad. This time, it naturally ended in Ao Yangming's gloominess. After Lu Yutong finished eating, she returned to the tent and treated it as a guest. Humph. The smile on Ao Yangming's face immediately disappeared, becoming livid. Spending so much time and still not being able to subdue a woman made him almost lose his patience. Before this, as long as he showed his identity as a direct disciple of the Winter Moon sect, which woman wouldn't immediately throw herself into his arms? Even if some women pretended to be reserved, as long as he showed a slightly indifferent attitude, they would immediately throw themselves at him in fear. This was his tried and tested experience when picking up girls. But Lu Yutong was good, and no matter what he did, she still ignored him. "Young master, the key is still on that young man," Uncle Fu came up and said. Ao Yangming nodded. As long as Ling Han didn't die, Lu Yutong would think of him and wouldn't let him enter her heart. However, Ling Han definitely ran as far as he could, so how could he find him and kill him? The key was that the ancient record was still on Ling Han. His memory wasn't bad, but it hadn't reached the level where he could memorize the entire ancient record in one go. Moreover, there were many pictures on it, so the difficulty of memorizing was naturally higher. The Winter Moon sect was also very interested in the Devil Sky Mystery Realm, but the time interval between the opening of this mystery realm was too long, and it wasn't fixed, so it wasn't easy to occupy it. He just happened to come to Rain Country and coincidentally encountered the opening of the mystery realm, so he put down his official business and entered the mystery realm. He didn't care about some blood zombie, no matter how chaotic it was still a matter of the 9 nations of the desolate north. Moreover, the Winter Moon sect had a spiritual infant-tier ancestor overseeing things, and even if the blood zombies came charging at them, they could kill them easily. Therefore, he really wanted to explore the depths of the Arcana territory. Who knows, there might be great fortunes waiting for him. He was originally very lucky to have obtained a book of the natives' personal notes. However, he was chased after flipping through a few pages. He could only hide the book halfway. He didn't expect that after being rescued by Ling Han, he would give up the book in order to save his life. This was the greatest humiliation in his life, and added with the fact that he had obtained the ancient records, he naturally had to kill Ling Han. That kid probably won't dare to appear again. Ao Yangming said hatefully. Without the map in the ancient records as a guide, the depths of the secret territory were fraught with danger. Even with Uncle Fu's protection, he didn't dare to venture deeper. After chatting for a while, the 4 of them returned to their tents to rest. From within the Black Tower, Ling Han saw everything. Under Small Tower's guidance, he could basically control the Black Tower. For example, he could be in the tower, but he could feel the surrounding environment and hear sounds. Of course, there was a distance restriction. Just now, he was almost discovered by Uncle Fu, but after entering the Black Tower, Small Tower told him that he could monitor the outside world from within the Black Tower, which undoubtedly saved him a lot of trouble. From a certain perspective, the Black Tower could be said to be his clone, but his control over this clone wasn't perfect, because there were 8 floors of the tower that hadn't been opened to him yet. Xiao, he appeared from the Black Tower and walked towards the tent where Lu Yutong was, his footsteps light. However, he only took 2 steps before entering the Black Tower again. A figure flashed by, and Uncle Fu shot out from the tent with a strange expression on his face. Just now, he heard a faint movement again, but when he ran out, it was empty, with no one in sight. He definitely didn't believe that someone could fly out of the range of his perception in such a short time, which naturally made him feel very strange. Both times were errors in judgment, and he couldn't help but doubt himself. Could it be that old age had blurred his vision? After the old man stood silently for a while, he shook his head and walked into the tent. However, after a few breaths, he jumped out again with a "Xiao, looked around, and after confirming that there was no one, he walked back into the tent. The old man was very suspicious. Ling Han thought inwardly. However, if it was him who sensed that the courtyard's restriction was touched, then he definitely wouldn't have any suspicion towards himself. Someone definitely entered, and if he didn't discover it, then the other party's hiding method was even more brilliant. He appeared again, and in less than 2 steps, he entered the Black Tower with a shio, disappearing once again. Uncle Fu appeared, and the strange expression on his face became even more apparent. He couldn't help but slap his head, feeling like he was going crazy. This time, he stood outside for a longer time, at least 5 minutes before turning around and entering the tent. Ling Han appeared and rushed into Lu Yutong's tent with one step. Ah! Lu Yutong immediately cried out, which instantly attracted the attention of Ao Yangming and the others. They all jumped out of the tent, and Ao Yangming was heard saying, "Miss Yutong, what's wrong?" "Nothing, just a nightmare." Lu Yutong looked at Ling Han in disbelief, while suppressing the panic in her heart and trying her best to speak in a calm tone. The 4 people outside didn't have any suspicions. Who would have thought that someone would actually sneak in? They all returned to their own tents. "It's too dangerous here, leave quickly," Lu Yutong said in an extremely low voice. "No matter, since I can come in, I can leave too." Ling Han smiled. "Call Ao Yangming over." Lu Yutong's eyes instantly lit up, and she said, "Use him as a hostage." Ling Han didn't have this plan. After obtaining the Black Tower's ability to hide, he didn't think of using his one and only chance of power boost on Uncle Fu, this old dog. With the ability he grasped now, it was enough for him to escape. He didn't explain, and said, "Call someone first." Lu Yutong nodded, calmed her mind, and raised her voice, "Young Master Ao, can you come over for a chat?" Yutong has something to ask. Just as she finished speaking, Ao Yangming immediately scuttled out, a proud smile on his lips. So, Lu Yutong's modesty was nothing more than this, and she still compromised. He was actually used to seeing beauties. Although Lu Yutong was an absolute beauty among absolute beauties, what Ao Yangming couldn't let go of was his pride. He had always been successful among women, but he ran into a wall in the hands of Lu Yutong. This made him hold his breath, and he was determined to conquer her. However, once Lu Yutong showed signs of compromising, his interest dropped greatly. As the saying goes, it's best not to have it. However, he hadn't truly succeeded yet, so he was still quite interested. He immediately tidied up his appearance, and walked towards Lu Yutong's tent. Uncle Fu didn't move. Lu Yutong's cultivation was sealed by him, and she couldn't do anything. Chapter 233. Yutong. Ao Yangming had just opened the tent when he saw a young man smiling at him, shocking him. Ling Han. He suddenly cried out. "Shio!" Uncle Fu instantly dashed out. His mission was to protect Ao Yangming. Too late. Ao Yangming had already fallen into the hands of a young man. A sword was pressed against his throat, and a line of blood appeared, causing him to stop abruptly. Ling Han was now a genuine gushing spring tier warrior, and he had fused 9 large origin nuclei into a super origin nucleus, then liquefied into the eye of the spring. This was many times stronger than the first layer of the gushing spring tier. He already had the 5 elements origin nuclei, and his power was 4 to 5 times stronger than people of the same tier. Now, it was at least a dozen times stronger. Even if the gap between each tier of the gushing spring tier was huge, he could at least match the 5th layer of the gushing spring tier in terms of power. This was because he had just broken through and hadn't reached the peak of the first layer of the gushing spring tier, and didn't include the increase in battle prowess brought by various martial arts techniques and methods. In terms of true battle prowess, he definitely surpassed 9 stars. 9 stars at the gushing spring tier against a poly tier warrior. How could he not capture him easily? Ling Han. Ao Yangming gritted his teeth, his face filled with intense humiliation and anger. He originally thought that Lu Yutong had successfully threatened him, but he didn't think that it was a trap set by the other party. In other words, Lu Yutong still chose Ling Han. This knowledge was like a slap to his face. "Let go of young master," Uncle Fu said coldly, his eyes filled with killing intent. He finally knew that the strange movements he felt before weren't an illusion caused by his blurred eyesight, but that the brat in front of him had clever methods that fooled his eyes. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, "Old man, don't scare me. I'm timid. If you scare me, my hand will shake and your young master's neck is slit open, don't blame me." His hand shook as expected, and a drop of blood immediately seeped out from Ao Yang Ming's neck, turning into a bead and rolling down. Uncle Fu's face was instantly filled with fear, and he said, "Stop. You're scaring me again." Ling Han pretended to be resentful, his hands shaking even more violently. Uncle Fu had no choice but to take a few steps back. "Young man, let's talk this out." Ao Yang Ming, however, was very arrogant, and said, "Ling Han, I'm a direct disciple of the Winter Moon sect. If you dare to touch a single hair of mine, the Winter Moon sect's power will crush you and everyone around you into pieces." Ling Han gave Ao Yang Ming a heavy slap on the head and said, "You're just a stray dog, where did your sense of superiority come from? Can't I slap you awake?" "Ling Han!" Ao Yang Ming shouted harshly. He had never been hit on the head before, and it made his eyes red. He wanted nothing more than to tear Ling Han into pieces. "What are you shouting for?" Ling Han snorted coldly, and with a karate chop, Ao Yang Ming fainted. "Young master!" Uncle Fu exclaimed, but after realizing that Ao Yang Ming had only fainted, he calmed down a bit and walked towards Ling Han again, saying, "Let go of young master, and I'll let you leave safely." "Old dog, do you think everyone else is an idiot?" Ling Han sneered. "Once I let him go, I'm afraid he'll immediately fall into your evil hands. I guarantee it with my reputation." Go, a dog servant, what bullshit reputation, stop embarrassing yourself," Ling Han said disdainfully. Uncle Fu trembled in anger. Although he was ordered to protect Ao Yang Ming and considered himself an old servant, as a spiritual ocean tier elite, he naturally had his dignity. Even in the Winter Moon sect, spiritual ocean tier was a power that couldn't be ignored. "Get out. I'm going to take a nap, and when I'm fully awake, I'll accompany you, old dog, to discuss the issue of your young master's redemption." Ling Han flicked his hands, and said, "You can rest now." Uncle Fu obviously couldn't kneel and rest, but when he saw Ling Han's sword swaying around Ao Yang Ming's neck, he could only sigh, close the tent, and sit cross-legged on the ground. He was waiting for an opportunity. As long as Ling Han wanted to run, then he'd poke his head out, and he'd explode his head with the force of a thunderbolt, not giving him the chance to use Ao Yang Ming to threaten him. In the tent, Ling Han smiled at Lu Yutong, and whispered into her ear, "I'll bring you to a place, don't resist." Feeling Ling Han's warm breath on her neck, Lu Yutong couldn't help but blush. She didn't hear clearly what Ling Han was saying, and only nodded her head randomly, foolishly. Ling Han grabbed Lu Yutong's slender hand, and with a thought, "Shio," he brought Lu Yutong and Ao Yang Ming into the Black Tower. Lu Yutong was stunned at first, then cried out in surprise. They were clearly in a small tent, so how did they suddenly come to such a large space? "Where is this place?" she murmured. "A safe place." Ling Han didn't explain in detail because it was hard to explain, and it involved his previous life. Moreover, the Black Tower's existence was too important. It wasn't that he didn't trust Lu Yutong, but this secret itself was a heavy burden, and he didn't want Lu Yutong to bear it. Lu Yutong nodded. She naturally trusted Ling Han completely. Wah! Hunyo pounced over, and just when Lu Yutong thought the little girl was missing her and opened her arms to hug her, Hunyo elegantly bypassed her and threw herself into Ling Han's embrace. She kept rubbing her head against Ling Han, then turned around and made a face at her, clearly showing off. Ling Han belonged to Nyo. That was her unspoken meaning. Lu Yutong's face couldn't help but twitch. She didn't expect this little girl's jealousy to be so strong. Ling Han patted Hu Nyo's head, and said to Lu Yutong, "It's all thanks to Nyo that I could find you so quickly. You have to thank her properly." Hu Nyo was even more pleased, and grinned at Lu Yutong. Lu Yutong was speechless, feeling that she met a strong opponent. Ling Han might be on guard against anyone, but he wouldn't be on guard against a little girl. The little girl could act spoiled to her heart's content, sticking to Ling Han all day. This was an advantage she and Li Xichan didn't have. Moreover, the little girl obviously treated Ling Han as her private property. Just now, it was obviously an action of protecting her food, and her jealousy was beyond reason. "You go rest first, I have to interrogate this guy." Ling Han picked up Ao Yang Ming, who was thrown to the side. This ingrate obviously had to die, but he still wanted to ask about the Winter Moon sect. Outside, Uncle Fu suddenly frowned because he hadn't heard any movement in the tent for a long time. He couldn't help but listen carefully, and his expression immediately changed because he couldn't even hear breathing or heartbeat. He hurriedly leaped out and threw himself into the tent. However, the small tent was empty. There was no one else in sight. How was this possible? Uncle Fu's face was ashen. Could it be that the brat had grasped some kind of teleportation ability and had already escaped with Ao Yang Ming? Chapter 234. Pa, pa, pa. With a series of slaps, Ao Yang Ming instantly woke up from the pain. "Where am I? Where's Uncle Fu?" he asked in a trembling voice. Ling Han kicked him and said, "Am I asking you, or are you asking me?" Ao Yang Ming gritted his teeth, but when he saw the unfamiliar environment around him, he couldn't help but look troubled. This was obviously far from the forest they were in before for such a plane to appear. How long had he been unconscious to be brought to such a far place? Was Uncle Fu trash that he let Ling Han bring him out? "You really want to be enemies with the Winter Moon sect?" he said coldly. Since he already revealed his identity as a direct disciple of the Winter Moon sect, he obviously couldn't shrink back and weaken the Winter Moon sect's prestige. "Pa!" Ling Han kicked him again, knocking out a few of Ao Yang Ming's teeth. His face was covered in blood, and he looked very miserable. But there was no sympathy for such an ingrate. Ling Han said indifferently, "Why did you come here?" The appearance of the Devil Sky Mystery Realm was an accident. No one expected it beforehand, so to say that Ao Yang Ming came specifically for the Mystery Realm, Ling Han definitely wouldn't believe it. Ao Yang Ming wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and revealed a hint of fear in his eyes. Now that Uncle Fu wasn't by his side, and the name of the Winter Moon sect couldn't scare this audacious guy in front of him, he could only be a wise man and say, "I'm here to find someone." "Pa!" He suffered another kick. He was so angry that he wanted to get up and fight Ling Han to the death, but when he saw Ling Han's cold gaze, he somehow felt a chill in his heart, and his courage instantly dissipated completely. "Don't speak half a sentence. If you keep stuttering, I'll first cripple your limbs and leave you with only one mouth to speak," Ling Han said coldly. Ao Yang Ming felt a chill rise from the bottom of his heart and instantly enveloped his entire body, making him feel like he was sealed in ice. If it were someone else who said such cruel words, he would definitely scoff. Who dared to treat a disciple of the Winter Moon sect like that? But this guy, Ling Han, was really very ruthless, causing him to feel an endless chill. "The person I'm looking for is called Feng Yan," he said honestly. Feng Yan. Upon hearing this name, Ling Han was instantly enlightened. He finally knew where Feng Yan's confidence came from. Winter Moon sect, why are you looking for him? What relationship does Feng Yan have with the Winter Moon sect? Ling Han asked. A few months ago, when Feng Yan was traveling outside, he met a grand elder of our sect, who intended to take him as a disciple, but gave him a test. He must break through to the spiritual ocean tier within 3 months, Ao Yang Ming explained. I want to befriend Feng Yan, so I came to Rain Country. I want to take advantage of the time when Feng Yan's name has not spread far and wide to befriend him. In the end, I encountered the opening of the Devil's Sky Mystery Realm halfway, so I entered the Mystery Realm first. Ao Yangming was very gloomy. He came to find Feng Yan in order to raise his position in the Winter Moon sect, but he didn't think that before he could see Feng Yan, he would first bump into Ling Han, this malignant star. Ling Han felt strange, and said, although Feng Yan has a special physique, it's only silver mirror body. What does that grand elder cultivate? Flower of life or spiritual infant? Hearing him say flower of life or spiritual infant so nonchalantly, Ao Yangming felt a wave of fear, because there was no trace of reverence in Ling Han's tone, as if he didn't care about spiritual infant tier warriors. In reality, it was indeed so. Spiritual infant, he said in a trembling voice. Strange. Ling Han shook his head. He now knew where Feng Yan's confidence came from. Becoming the personal disciple of a spiritual infant tier elite naturally meant that he could do whatever he wanted in Rain Country. Even the Rain Emperor wouldn't dare to touch him, or else an old spiritual infant tier monster would be drawn out, and even the Flower Blossom tier warrior of Rain Country wouldn't be able to resist. The problem was Silver Mirror Body worthy of a spiritual infant tier elite taking him as a disciple? Not to mention Silver Mirror Body, even Gold Mirror Body was a bit of a stretch. After all, spiritual infant already stood on the 7th step of martial art, and above were only the deity transformation and heaven tier. Above, even above, was the shattering void tier, where one could break through the void and enter the divine realm, becoming a god. Feng Yan should have other secrets on him to attract a spiritual infant tier elite to take him as a disciple. Ling Han had long sensed this. For example, he could fight against the eldest imperial prince when he was 2 small tiers weaker, and it was a domineering martial arts technique like Son of Heaven fist technique that could borrow power of the nation. There'll be a battle sooner or later, and when the time comes, let me dig out all your secrets with my own hands. Ling Han muttered. Ling Han, let me go, and we can pretend nothing happened, Ao Yangming probed. You're asking for a beating again, Ling Han said slowly. Ao Yangming instantly covered his mouth in fear. He really didn't have many teeth left to be ravaged by Ling Han. Who is Ao Feng to you? Ling Han finally asked the main question. Ao Yangming looked surprised. How could a mere little martial artist from Rain Country know his father's name? Could it be that it was impossible for him? Although his father had hundreds of illegitimate children, all of them had the surname Ao. N. Ling Han's expression turned cold. That's my father. Ao Yangming hurriedly said. What's Ao Feng's cultivation level now? I'm not too sure, Ao Yangming said, and after receiving Ling Han's sharp gaze, he hurriedly explained, I usually don't have many chances to see my father, and I'm not his favorite child, so I'm not too clear. But according to the people in the sect, my father reached the peak stage of the spiritual pedestal tier 5 years ago. He involuntarily straightened his back. Although Ao Feng was dissolute by nature, his talent in martial art was excellent, and it was possible for him to cross into the Flower Blossom tier and become a true core member of the Winter Moon sect. Ling Han also nodded inwardly. Over 10 years had passed, so it was normal for Ao Feng's cultivation to rise. However, it would be a bit difficult for Ling Dongxing to personally take revenge. He had to increase his cultivation as soon as possible to repair Ling Dongxing's spirit base and use large amounts of medicinal pills to forcefully smash Ling Dongxing into the Flower Blossom tier. The Flower Blossom tier was the biggest dividing line in martial art. It could almost be said that the spiritual pedestal tier was a powerful mortal, and the Flower Blossom tier had already surpassed the mortal level. The difference was indescribable. Even if Ling Han reached the peak stage of the spiritual pedestal tier, with his freakishness, he couldn't defeat a first-layer Flower Blossom tier cultivator. Being able to stay alive was enough to be proud. If Ling Dongxing took the first step into the Flower Blossom tier, then suppressing Ao Feng would be a piece of cake, completely ignoring the difference in cultivation. martial arts, and experience. How many children does your old man have? Ling Han was suddenly a bit curious. Ao Yang Ming was just about to shake his head and say he didn't know, but thinking of Ling Han's ruthlessness, he hurriedly corrected himself. I really don't know the exact number. Father never gathered us together, but at least 200 to 300. What a breeding pig, Ling Han sneered, and his expression turned serious as he asked, do you know a person called Yu Hong Chang? Chapter 235. This alchemy furnace that Ling Han had once used, and now only had a symbolic meaning, was still rising in price. Very soon, it had crossed the threshold of 100,000 origin crystals, but the three big bosses of alchemy had no intention of giving up, and were still endlessly increasing the price, as if they would not stop until they had emptied out all their savings. The three alchemists really have true love for the Grandmaster Ling Han from 10,000 years ago, Guang Yuan said ruefully. That's right, it's already over 100,000 origin crystals. How many times higher is this price? Zhu Wujiu nodded as well. Ling Han's expression instantly darkened. He did not need this kind of true love. Lu Yutong and Li Xichan thought that Ling Han was in a bad mood because he had been defeated by the Ling Han from 10,000 years ago, and hurriedly comforted him. Hun Yo was much more direct, and gave him a peck on the cheek, giggling. However, Long Yong Chang and the other two did not have any intention of stopping. The price soared to 200,000, and was advancing towards 300,000, which caused everyone to involuntarily click their tongues. Firstly, they were shocked by the determination of the three big bosses, and secondly, they were shocked by how rich alchemists were. 300,000 origin crystals, what kind of concept was that? Even for the three big bosses of alchemy, 300,000 origin crystals would probably be a heavy blow. After all, what they usually concocted were all black-grade alchemical pills, and black-grade alchemical pills were usually sold in gold and silver. Moreover, the three alchemists were definitely still attempting to break through to become Earth-grade middle-level alchemists, and every time they failed in their attempt, what kind of astronomical price would they have to expend? These had definitely been purchased using origin crystals. Thus, for these three to be able to save up 300,000 origin crystals was indeed impressive, but they had probably reached their limit. As expected, after the price reached 300,000, the three big bosses of alchemy appeared to be lacking in confidence. In the end, the price was fixed at 332,853 origin crystals. Why was there a fraction? That was because Long Yong Chang and the other two were really going all out, and had taken out all the origin crystals they had on them. Now, the highest price was set by Li Xiyuan, and he could not help but look delighted. He could finally obtain the alchemy furnace that the alchemy emperor had once used. This was a totem, a symbol. Are there any more bids? The auctioneer asked. Reaching such a high price not only shocked him, but it was also within reason. He was shocked because this was only a broken alchemy furnace, but who asked it to be used by the alchemy emperor? In the eyes of his followers, not to mention 300,000, even 1,000,000 would not be too much. 400,000. It was at this moment that a young and pleasant voice of a woman rang out. She spoke very casually, but everyone was shocked. This was 400,000 origin crystals, not 400,000 gold and silver. Ling Han heard it clearly. This woman was one of the two people who had ridiculed him just now. Previously, he had still found it strange that since these two people worshipped the him of 10,000 years ago so much, why had they not made a single sound during the auction? So it turned out that they were very confident, and directly made a killing move. True, after competing for so long, she naturally knew the bottom line of Long Yong Zhang and the others. Thus, she could instantly kill them with a single bid, and also save as much money as possible. 500,000. Another voice rang out. It was hoarse and old. It was precisely the other person who had previously ridiculed Ling Han, that old man. 600,000. The woman increased the bid indifferently, as if this 600,000 was just a piece of paper. 700,000. The old man was not afraid to fight. 900,000. This time, it was Long Yongzhang's voice. It should be the three big bosses of alchemy joining hands and pooling all the origin crystals together. 1 million, the woman and the old man said at the same time. 1,500,000. The woman paused, and directly called out a sky-high price. It was as if she was very impatient, and did not want to increase the bid bit by bit like this. 2 million. The old man was even more unafraid. 2 super tycoons. In the beginning, who would have thought that the real competitors for this alchemy furnace would actually be the two of them? Putting aside their status, merely being able to produce 2 million origin crystals would be enough for them to sit in the private room on the 5th floor. For the Spirit Treasures Pavilion that did business, having money was everything. Ling Han could not help but feel rueful, and mumbled, "I've also used quite a few alchemy furnaces now. Should I consider selling them all?" This caused Lu Yutong and the others to laugh. They had thought that he was mocking himself, but who would have thought that the two Ling Hans were actually the same person? After the price had reached such a height, even Long Yongzhang and the others could only act as guests. They were all very regretful. This was an alchemy furnace that had been used by the alchemy emperor. If it could be left in the Star Brilliance Palace Hall, then it would definitely be able to make this place a holy land for all alchemists. However, they did not know that as long as Ling Han once again ascended to the pinnacle, this place, as an important place for Ling Han to break through to become an Earth-grade alchemist, would definitely become a holy land for alchemists. 300,000, 2-star origin crystals. The woman bid again, and instantly gave everyone a shock. In theory, if the grade of origin crystals increased by 1 level, the price would indeed increase tenfold, but in reality, no one would be willing to spend high-grade origin crystals like money. Let's put it this way. If the same amount of 1-star origin crystals could allow one to complete a breakthrough in 3 years, then 2-star origin crystals would only require 1 year. Yes, time was the most important thing. Especially for martial artists below the flower blossom tier, who only had a lifespan of a mere 100 years. Then, the younger one broke through to the spiritual pedestal tier, the more time they would have to break through to the flower blossom tier. Once they crossed over, they would be able to shed their mortal body. 1-star origin crystals were refined by spiritual ocean tier martial artists, and were of great help to the cultivation of body refining tier, element gathering tier, gushing spring tier, and spiritual ocean tier martial artists. They were able to provide sufficient origin power, but for spiritual pedestal tier martial artists, the effects of 1-star origin crystals would be greatly reduced, and they would need 2-star origin crystals to display their effects. And for flower blossom tier martial artists, 1-star origin crystals, aside from being able to be used as money, were completely useless. Thus, the higher the grade of the origin crystal, not only did it mean that its effects were better, it also meant that it had a wider range of uses. There were some precious spirit herbs that could only be purchased with origin crystals, and even had to be 4-star, 5-star, or even 6-star origin crystals. Thus, the true value of 300,000 2-star origin crystals was far higher than 3 million star origin crystals. 400,000 2-star origin crystals. The old man was similarly calm and composed. Everyone was so shocked that their eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. What kind of concept was 400,000 2-star origin crystals? It required 40,000 spiritual pedestal tier martial artists to concoct it for an entire year. Were there 100,000 spiritual pedestal tier martial artists in the whole North region? Most importantly, these two people were so indifferent, as if they did not care at all. Were they really people from the North region? Ling Han was also very curious. If it was Yong Longzhang and his group fighting over the alchemy furnace, he could still understand, but what were these two people doing? He could not help but activate the Eye of Truth and look over. First, he found that old man, but the latter immediately sensed him and gave a heavy humph, sending out a wave of sound. Woo! Ling Han gave a muffled humph, and a streak of blood immediately gushed out from his right eye. He had actually suffered a small loss from this blow. Flower blossom tear, that was a power that surpassed mortals. Ling Han, Lu Yutong and the others were all greatly shocked. Why did he suddenly shed tears of blood out of nowhere? Only Hunyo vigilantly stared in one direction, which was precisely where the old man was. Obviously, the little girl was not staring randomly, but had really sensed something, and had already revealed a fierce expression. Chapter 236. Ling Han nodded. From that personal note, he knew that only after the Great River did the formation begin to be set up. If one wanted to charge through it, they either had an extremely deep understanding of formations, or their cultivation level was extremely high, and they had overwhelming power. But if one wanted to understand this mystery realm, they had to enter the deepest part. If it was poly-tier, Ling Han would definitely act according to his abilities, and there was no need to lose his life for curiosity. But now, he was full of confidence. Even if he couldn't explore the mystery realm's secrets, he could at least retreat unscathed. First, see if we can find any spirit herbs, he said. The first floor of the Black Tower had the ability to cultivate spirit herbs, and he was the Alchemy Emperor, so if he didn't make use of this, he'd be too stupid. The three started to wander around the mountains. Because this place was very dangerous, and the place was big enough, there were few people. As far as the eye could see, it was a mottled forest. The trees and flowers here were very different in color, creating such a complicated visual effect. Unexpectedly, Hunyo performed a meritorious deed again. The little girl wrinkled her nose and sniffed, and actually brought Ling Han to find a blue star grass. This was a 4th-tier spirit herb, and could be refined into a 4th-tier fury pill. Spiritual ocean tier elites could increase their strength by about 20% after taking it, and it was extremely practical. Yeah, how did Nyo find it? Ling Han asked curiously. Nyo is a foodie, Hunyo said proudly. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh loudly. He wasn't too surprised about this, because Hunyo's spirit base was too shocking, so she naturally couldn't be ordinary. It was normal for her to have some abilities different from normal people. Lu Yutong, on the other hand, was very gloomy. In the fight for affection, her performance was completely suppressed by this 5 or 6-year-old little girl. She was really a bit ashamed. Ling Han carefully dug out this stalk of blue star grass. Because the older the blue star grass, the better the effects of the fury pill refined would be. At most, it could even increase one's power by 100%. However, this kind of medicinal power was definitely not something that everyone could endure. It was not impossible for one's body to be torn apart by the violent medicinal power. He planted the blue star grass in the Black Tower, and 1 year was equivalent to 1,000 years. Normally, a blue star grass only needed to reach 50 years of age. Now, this blue star grass was almost 30 years old, so it would only take a day to reach 50 years of age. Hunyo performed meritorious deeds again and again, and soon found another 7-stringed wood. 7-string wood, also known as gloomy heavy wood, was an excellent supplement for cultivating ice-type martial techniques. There was no need to refine it into a pill, it could be refined like a heavenly flame. The value of 7-stringed wood depended on its age. The older it was, the better, but it was very difficult to find one that was more than 1,000 years old. This 7-string tree was only over 100 years old, but it didn't matter. After living in the Black Tower for a few months, it would be able to reach the 1,000-year effect. However, good luck did not always accompany them. In the next 2 days, they gained nothing. Hunyo did find another spirit tree, but unfortunately, the fruits on it had already been plucked, and Ling Han disregarded all consequences and transplanted them into the Black Tower. There's someone. Ling Han suddenly stopped in his tracks. N. Hunyo also nodded, looking very serious. On the mountaintop ahead, a group of over 10 people came over. They were all very young, with the oldest being no more than 30 years old. There were both males and females. Ling Han's gaze swept over, and he couldn't help but reveal a hint of surprise. Ling Han. One of the girls in the group called out first. She waved at him as she quickly walked over. It was Li Si-chan previously. She hadn't rushed to the central hall, and didn't expect to meet him here. Seeing Li Si-chan come over, those youngsters also followed. All of them had their noses in the air, appearing very arrogant. "Oh, you're that Ling Han," a youngster in embroidered clothing said indifferently. Although his tone was calm, it carried a sense of superiority, as if a superior was looking down on ordinary people. "Are there many Ling Hans?" Ling Han asked casually. Shua, a youngster rushed out, and said, "I heard that you can stand against Feng Yan, but I don't believe it. Who do you think you are? What does it have to do with me whether you believe it or not?" Ling Han said indifferently. That youngster was furious, and shouted, "I'm Huang Weizhe of the Huang family, and you dare insult me. Who do I think I am?" "Oh, then I was wrong. So you're not a thing." Ling Han nodded, readily accepting the advice. "You." Huang Weizhe's eyes widened in anger, revealing a shocking killing intent. Hunyo immediately bared her teeth, her small hands already waving uncontrollably, revealing her menacing fangs. "Weizhe." The youngster in embroidered clothing stopped him lightly, and said with a smile, in front of two beauties, "How could you lose your composure like this? Brother Cheng Hu is right." Huang Weizhe hurriedly put away his angry expression. He couldn't lose his composure in front of two exquisite beauties. "Sister Yutong." The youngster in embroidered clothing called out to Lu Yutong. Obviously, the two of them knew each other. This guy didn't give Ling Han face, so Lu Yutong obviously wouldn't give him face. She merely turned her pretty face slightly, pretending not to have heard. Seeing this scene, these youngsters were all very displeased. What virtue or ability did Ling Han have that he could actually make a girl favored by the heavens so resolutely fall for him? Moreover, if it was only Lu Yutong, then so be it, but now even Li Si-chan seemed to have become his as well. How could the youngsters of the imperial city accept this? "I am Li Chenghu." The youngster in embroidered clothing tried his best to maintain his poise, and said to Ling Han, "I've long heard of Brother Ling Han's great name. I wonder if we could have a spar." "Li Chenghu, why don't you call yourself Li Chenglong? Your ambition is too low, isn't it?" Ling Han said with a smile. Li Chenghu couldn't help but look indignant. The dragon was the totem of the imperial family, and if he called himself Chenglong, then it would offend the imperial family. A few thousand years ago, when Rain Country had just been established, it wasn't a big deal. At that time, the 9 great clans were about the same in power, but now the Qi family had an old monster of the flower blossom tier overseeing it, and with the power of one family, they could firmly suppress the 8 great clans, causing them to involuntarily take a step back. "What a sharp tongue, but how about your hands?" he said coldly. "Li Chenghu, you're too shameless. Ling Han is only in the first layer of Pali, and you're already in the 3rd layer of Gushing Spring tier, and you have the nerve to say you want to spar?" Li Si-chan immediately called out. "First layer of Pali." Li Chenghu and the others all had strange expressions. The aura that Ling Han emitted was obviously in the 1st layer of Gushing Spring tier. 3 layers against 1 layer. It was indeed a bit of bullying, but they were also in the early stage of Gushing Spring tier, so it was within acceptable range. Ling Han sighed. Why did someone have to seek abuse? He brushed off his hands, and said, "I don't have time to waste on trash like you. Come at me together, lest another one comes out after I defeat one, saying he's not convinced or something. If you lose, then get lost." Impudence. These youngsters were all seething. He actually dared to look down on them like this. It was more refreshing to read on one's phone. Chapter 237. Ling Han, you're too arrogant. Li Chenghu and the others reprimanded. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, "It's not that I'm looking down on you guys, but to be honest, everyone is indeed trash." Bullshit. Li Chenghu and Huang Wei's couldn't hold it in anymore, and both attacked. In reality, only the two of them were qualified, because the others were only in the poly tier, and against someone in the first layer of the gushing spring tier, they would naturally be defeated. However, Li and Huang, as the disciples of the two great clans, were indeed extraordinarily strong. They both used swords, and used martial arts techniques right off the bat, each of them extraordinary. Li Chenghu struck with his sword, and over a dozen flames appeared out of thin air, condensing into flowers of fire that rapidly floated towards Ling Han. As Huang Wei's sword danced, the ground actually trembled lightly, as if it was dancing. Ling Han was unmoving, his expression calm. Arrogant. Li and Huang both humphed coldly. They had already unleashed their ultimate moves, yet Ling Han was still so arrogant. He was really asking for trouble. Then, they would heavily injure him so that he would remember this lesson well. They'd also heard some things about Ling Han from their elders, and were strictly warned not to get into conflict with him. However, they were young and impetuous, and this involved two absolute beauties, Lu Yutong and Li Si-chan, so how could they hold back? Thus, they definitely didn't dare to kill, but they'd always wanted to teach Ling Han a good lesson, and let this brat know that the twin beauties of the Imperial City were the twin beauties of the Imperial City because they belonged to the Imperial City, and definitely weren't something a country bumpkin could covet. Shwa, the two's attacks blasted over at the same time. Ling Han finally moved, and very casually struck out two palms. His two palms were really very casual, and everyone could clearly see them. There was nothing special about them, but they easily broke through Li and Huang's sword momentum, hitting their chests. Peng, peng, two muffled sounds, and Li and Huang were sent flying at the same time. They spat out a mouthful of blood in midair, and after flying in an arc, they landed on the ground almost at the same time. Everyone was shocked. Li Chenghu was in the third layer of the gushing spring tier, and though Huang Weize was slightly weaker, he was still in the second layer of the gushing spring tier. The two of them had actually been defeated by a single move from Ling Han. Most importantly, Ling Han was only in the first layer of the gushing spring tier, and he had done it so casually. It was as if even if these two people were 10 times stronger, they would still be easily dealt with by him. It was precisely this sort of understanding that caused Li and Huang to be extremely dazed, and their confidence was completely obliterated. For a time, they were completely unable to think. For Ling Han, as long as his cultivation level was not at a disadvantage, then with his battle instinct as a heaven tier warrior, taking care of a few puny gushing spring tier warriors was a piece of cake, and could be done with ease. Scram! He shouted, showing no mercy. If these people had been polite, then he would have politely asked them to leave. But they wanted to make him lose face, so why should he give them face? He wouldn't let outsiders know about the existence of the Black Tower, so he was naturally unwilling to let outsiders accompany him. Li and Huang's injuries were not serious, and they quickly climbed up. They gave Ling Han a hateful look, then turned and left. Once they left, the others naturally followed suit. Li Si-chan, why don't you go with them? Lu Yutong asked, very displeased. I only met them on the way, so we became companions. Moreover, I'm only a small alchemist, not a member of the 8 great clans. In fact, you're the one who's on the same side as them, Li Si-chan retorted. Hang. The two glared at each other, neither willing to give in. Cece. Hunyo threw herself into Ling Han's arms, her small face full of smiles. Two ugly things were fighting blindly, and Ling Han was Nyo's. But Ling Han, this time you've offended almost all of the younger generation of the 8 great clans. When you return to the Imperial City, it's possible that you'll have a hard time moving forward, the two girls said worriedly as they quickly ended their confrontation. Ling Han smiled confidently. He'd now leaped into gushing spring tier, and finally caught up to the mainstream of the younger generation in terms of cultivation tier. As long as the older generation didn't appear, who did he need to fear? Counter soldiers with arms, and water with earth, he said. Lu Yutong and Huang Yutong thought so. It was useless to worry now, and as long as Tianyiji delivered a black grade high-level badge to Ling Han, even the clan heads of the 8 great clans would have to politely call Ling Han Grandmaster Ling when they saw him. Even if the younger generation joined forces, what use would it be? Half a day later, they arrived in front of a large river. Further ahead was the vast unknown region of the Mystery Realm, but this river was not easy to cross. Ling Han looked closely, and there were flashes of lightning flashing in the surging river. Just a few more glances made his soul throb. This was a lightning river, and whoever crossed it rashly would definitely be torn into pieces by the power of lightning. Not to mention gushing spring tier and spiritual ocean tier warriors, even heaven tier warriors would frown if they came. Ling Han felt strange, and said, "Did someone cross the river before?" And, according to the records of our ancestors, there was, but as to how they crossed, because no one has ever returned, there's no way to know, Lu Yutong said. Ling Han nodded. According to the notes left by Xiao Ding, there was a hidden stump left in this lightning river, and at a certain time every day, it would appear on the surface of the water, allowing people to cross. But the time was very short, fleeting. However, every time many people came in, there would always be people who coincidentally encountered it, and there would definitely be people who were brave and wanted to go to the other side of the river to search for opportunities, but never returned. Ling Han was now looking for the place where this hidden stump appeared. They walked along the river, looking for spirit grass and spirit trees along the way, and had some gains. Although they were only low-level ones, no matter how small a mosquito's leg was, it was still meat. Anyways, the space of the Black Tower was almost infinite, so why waste it? When Ling Han, along with the grass and trees, suddenly disappeared, Li Si-chan naturally looked as if she had seen a ghost. Lu Yutong, on the other hand, was immensely pleased with herself. Although her expression had not been any better a few days ago, now she could mock Li Si-chan for being a country bumpkin and making a fuss over nothing. Ling Han told the 2 girls the secret of the spatial ring, and only said that he now had a better spatial container, so he naturally didn't have to explain the secret of the Black Tower. He didn't need this ring now, either, the Black Tower could replace it, and the space was countless times larger, and the functions were also countless times stronger. The 2 girls were curious, and their eyes burned as they stared at the ring. Firstly, the spatial ring was indeed a good thing, and secondly, the ring represented another meaning. Nyos. The 2 girls were still waiting for Ling Han to decide who to give it to, but unexpectedly, there was a guy who didn't play by the rules, directly grabbing it and wearing it on his hand while grinning. However, how old was Hunyeo? Even when she wore it on her thumb, it was still empty, causing the little girl to cry out in anger. Ling Han laughed loudly, and took out a red string to string the ring together, turning it into a necklace and hanging it around Hunyeo's neck. Instantly, the little girl's anger turned into joy, and she kissed Ling Han on the cheek as a reward. Lu Yutong and Li Si-chan both felt an indescribable sense of danger from each other. Chapter 238. Ling Han gave the spatial ring to Hunyeo with consideration, because the little girl's appetite was too big. As long as the spatial ring was filled with food, then even if something happened and she got lost, she wouldn't have to worry about starvation in a short period of time. Lu Yutong and Li Si-chan could only nod helplessly, and at the same time breathed a sigh of relief, because there was only one ring, and whoever it was given to, the other would inevitably be dejected. They couldn't compete with a little girl. In the next few days, Ling Han felt the atmosphere was a bit strange. Lu Yutong and Li Si-chan quarreled less and less, making him feel as if the sun rose from the west for such a strange thing to happen. After another day, Ling Han finally found the place mentioned in the notebook. There were 2 stone pillars that suddenly rose up from the riverside. They were about 300 meters tall, and their characteristics were very obvious. This was where the hidden stakes were located. They waited, and after more than 5 hours, they saw black stakes suddenly appear, but they definitely didn't appear from the bottom of the river, but like the center hall before, they appeared out of thin air. Ling Han didn't hesitate and said, "You guys go in first." He swept his hand and put the 3 girls into the black tower at the same time, while he leaped quickly. Shwa, 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 he was like a dragonfly skimming the water, the tips of his feet tapping on the stakes, and swiftly dashed towards the other side of the river. Shwa, at this moment, a graceful figure shot out, following closely behind Ling Han. Ling Han took a big stride and arrived at the other side. Looking back, he saw a girl also crossing the river. After a glance, his eyes couldn't help but tighten slightly. This girl was actually in the spiritual ocean tier. Taking a closer look, Ling Han couldn't help but feel a sense of amazement. Lu Yutong and Li Xichan were both extremely beautiful, and were also famous in the imperial city, known as the Twin Beauties, but compared to this girl, they obviously paled in comparison. Ling Han made a comparison. This girl's beauty could rank in the top 10 of the beauties he'd seen in his life, and could even charge into the top 3. It should be known that he had been a heaven-tier elite in his previous life, and had seen countless beauties. For this woman to be able to rank in the top 10, she was indeed extraordinarily beautiful. Most importantly, she was very young, at most 20 years old. A 20-year-old spiritual ocean tier warrior, even Ling Han had to nod his head. Among all the geniuses he had met in his previous life, he could be ranked. How could there be such a genius in the tiny 9 nations of the desolate north? Qi Xianzi. Qi Xianzi. A voice called out from the other side of the river. Gu Fenghua's figure had already appeared, and it was obvious that he was chasing after that woman. Ling Han suddenly recalled that this fellow said he'd encountered a peerlessly beautiful heavenly immortal on the way and followed her all the way into the secret realm. Obviously, this woman should be that heavenly immortal. It was indeed stunningly beautiful. But at this moment, something happened. The stakes disappeared. They didn't disappear one by one. Instead, they all disappeared in an instant, as if they had never existed. Gu Fenghua instantly stopped. He was a freak, yes, but he was not an idiot. How would he dare to cross the river of lightning? The woman was also shocked, but did not panic. With a light shout, a ball of fierce flames surged out from her body, forming a propelling force that instantly stopped her rapidly falling figure, and she glided towards the other side of the river. Her white robes fluttered, and the flames danced, as if she was a fairy. Gu Fenghua instantly felt refreshed, but immediately gave himself a slap, and said, "Now is not the time to admire. Beauty Chi, do your best, do your best." This guy was really a clown. Ling Han shook his head, and with a glance, he knew that if that woman did not have any other tricks up her sleeve, there was no way she could have glided to the other side of the river. The woman obviously knew this as well, and her pretty face could not help but reveal an expression of unwillingness. Was she going to die here in a muddle? Shwa, it was at this moment that a metal thread as thin as silk shot over and lightly wrapped around her waist. A great force surged over, and she was instantly pulled towards the other side of the river. How could she let go of such a slim chance of survival? She hurriedly used this force to straighten her waist, and instantly, an astonishing elasticity burst forth, and her figure inconceivably rose by a few centimeters. Ling Han retracted his hand, and Xiao, the blood-sucking origin gold once again transformed into a bracelet. With the help of this external force, the woman landed lightly on the ground. Her delicate figure suddenly trembled, and she spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. Just now, her whole body had spat out flames, and she had forcefully stopped her fall. Actually, she had paid a great price. Good. When the woman landed stably on the ground, Gu Fenghua immediately jumped up, and waved at Ling Han, saying, "As expected of my good man, well done." These words sounded so awkward no matter how he listened, and Ling Han instantly shivered. as expected of a freak. The woman took out an alchemical pill and swallowed it, then nodded at Ling Han, and said, "Thank you." Ling Han nodded, and said, "It was nothing, no need to be polite. The debt of saving my life, Chi Hua Lan will definitely repay it," the woman said again, her expression very serious. "Since you are so insistent," Ling Han nodded, and said, "All right, but there's no need for you to repay me with your body." "Pay?" Chi Hua Lan instantly spat in her heart, thinking, even if you want to, there's no way. How could she marry such an ordinary person? However, once this joke was made, her tone instantly became a little colder, and she said, "You don't have to worry about that. Ling Han, take good care of Fairy Chi for me." Gu Fenghua roared from the other side of the river, obviously unwilling to be a candle in the fire. "You know that person?" Chi Hua Lan asked Ling Han, a hint of disdain in her eyes. Ling Han was very speechless. Who asked him to cross paths with this freak twice, and become friends with him? He nodded, and said, "He is my friend." The disdain in Chi Hua Lan's eyes became even stronger. Being friends with a freak, then she herself was not that normal either. She did not speak anymore. She would repay the debt of saving her life, but she definitely did not want to have anything to do with Ling Han. Even speaking another word was disgusting. Ling Han saw her expression, and he scoffed in his heart. He had only saved her on a whim. In this world, there were prodigies who perished due to accidents at every moment, and it did not make much of a difference to have one more. He no longer paid attention to her, and instead looked forward. From here onwards, it was the true mystery realm. The number of people who had set foot here in the past few thousand years could be counted on one's fingers. But he could not see anything clearly. It was very strange. Separated by the River of Thunder, they could clearly see that this place should also be a forest, and the landscape could be seen clearly from dozens of kilometers away. But when they reached this side of the river, there was fog everywhere. Not to mention dozens of kilometers away, they could not even see things that were dozens of meters away. Strange. Ling Han and Chi Hua Lan both said in their hearts. This was the effect of the formation. This place is very dangerous. I advise you to stay here, and when the floating bridge appears, return to the other side. Don't throw your life away in vain, Chi Hua Lan said. He did not expect this woman to be so cold on the outside, but warm on the inside. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, "Thank you for your concern. Only a ghost would care about you." Chi Hua Lan snorted. "I just don't want you to die before I have repaid your debt of saving my life." Chapter 239. Heaven's Sword Sect. These three words seem to have magical power, causing all the young men and women here to feel deep veneration, revealing endless yearning. Close to 10,000 years ago, a great calamity occurred in the vast lands. It was the Heaven's Sword Sect, the Absolute Saber Sect, the Cloud Phoenix Sect, and several other super forces that led their seniors into a bloody battle, finally quelling the great calamity, resulting in the present 10,000 years of peace. Moreover, the Heaven's Sword Sect has an elite of the Shattering Void tier keeping watch, and is practically a living monument of martial arts. If it were me, there's no need to say anything, and I would immediately run over. Ha, cut off your lower half, and do some good plastic surgery on your face. You'll have a chance. Get lost. Everyone laughed loudly, but they had an indescribable yearning towards the Heaven's Sword Sect. This was a true holy land of martial arts, possessing an immortal inheritance. Perhaps one day, a supreme being that could break through the void and enter into the realm of immortals would appear. What happened in the end? Did Zhu Xian'er go to the middle state? Lu Yutong was curious, and could not help but ask. No, the person who had heard the gossip said. I heard that Zhu Xian'er is extremely filial. Her master went mad during cultivation a few years ago, so she made a great vow that she would definitely help her master recover. Whoever was able to do so, she would give him any amount of cultivation resources, and would even be willing to marry him. However, according to a genius doctor, to cure that kind of Tao injury, only a heaven-grade alchemical pill would be able to do so. So, our celestial maiden would still have to go to the middle state in the end. Who knows which bastard would benefit from it? When he said the last sentence, he was already gritting his teeth, as if he had already seen the goddess of his dreams being embraced by some damn man. That was a heart-wrenching sight. Shua, all of a sudden, everyone's gazes were fixed on Ling Han. "Why are you all so concerned about me?" Ling Han asked very innocently. "If there's anyone in the North region that can become a heaven-grade alchemist, then it's definitely you." Gu Fenghua laughed loudly. "You're such a freak, and becoming a heaven-grade alchemist is just around the corner. At that time, you'll be able to hold a beauty in your arms. I have something to discuss with you. Can you give me a pair of Fairy Zhu's underwear?" Peng, 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 peng. Without waiting for Ling Han to speak, this freak had already been given a good thrashing by over a dozen people who were in love with Zhu Xian'er. In an instant, he was beaten so badly that he no longer looked human. "That's right, that's Fairy Zhu we're talking about," Lu Yutong said, extremely intoxicated. "Heng." Li Si-chan was the same. Only Hu Niu did not mind at all, and thought internally, Ling Han is Niu's, a bunch of silly girls. Ling Han only smiled calmly. In his last life, what kind of beauty had he not seen? The heavenly phoenix divine maiden was even said to be the most beautiful woman in the world, but it wasn't that he had not been moved. However, when she asked him to concoct alchemical pills for her, he had asked the heavenly phoenix divine maiden to tell him her real name. He didn't know what was wrong with this woman. Asking her for her name made it seem like he wanted to kill her. Later on, she would come knocking on his door every 2 or 3 days, and without saying another word, she would make a move to take the alchemical pills, as if he was her master. If he wanted to stop her and fight with her, that would be asking for abuse. The reason why Ling Han wanted to break through to the shattering void tears so badly was because he had had enough of the heavenly phoenix divine maiden's bullying and humiliation. He wanted to turn the tables and become the master, but the result was, not long after, he was tormented and killed by the Black Tower. If the heavenly phoenix divine maiden had entered into the realm of immortals, she should still be so beautiful that it would make one's heart flutter, right? All of a sudden, he somewhat missed the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, the sword emperor, and the setting sun saber emperor. Had these guys died long ago, or had they broken into the realm of immortals? Logically speaking, it was possible that Jiang Yufeng had entered into the realm of immortals, so these guys should be even less of a problem, right? Are you so engrossed in your thoughts? Lu Yutong was jealous, and could not help but pinch Ling Han's waist. However, when she saw Li Si-chan also pinch the other side of Ling Han's waist, she could not help but giggle. Ling Han, however, said, "Then what about the Winter Moon sect? What shocking geniuses do they have? If it's the Winter Moon sect, the 7 sons of the Ao family should be the strongest," Lin Xiangqin said after some thought. Ao Feng's 7th son? Ling Han asked. No, Ao Feng has 7 sons, and they're all geniuses, collectively known as the 7 sons of the Ao family, Su Wentong explained. These 7 are all at the peak stage of the spiritual ocean tier, and any one of them could step into the spiritual pedestal tier at any time. The dragon gave birth to 9 sons, and as expected, they were all different. Ao Yangming was only in the element gathering tier, but his brothers were about to reach the spiritual pedestal tier. There might be a few who were even more disdainful, and were still in the body refining tier. Ling Han rubbed his chin, and said, "Who are these 7 people?" Gu Fenghua shook his head, and said, "Ao Feng has too many illegitimate children, who can remember who they are. Those 7 are the most promising, so they're called first Ao, second Ao, third Ao, all the way up to 7th Ao." This Ling Han also felt like breaking out in a cold sweat. There were too many, and outsiders couldn't even remember their names. Crippling these 7 people, Ao Feng would probably feel a great heartache, right? Thinking of the pain Ling Dongxing had to endure, Ling Han couldn't help but grit his teeth in hatred. Ao Feng had to be the last one to be killed, so that he could taste that heart-wrenching pain before he died. Very smoothly, he sold a large amount of 100-year-old ginseng and Ganoderma, earning him close to 400,000 origin crystals. One had to know that with so many people in the 9 nations of the desolate north, they had only spent a few 100,000 or so origin crystals, but now there were only a dozen or so people here, yet they had bought almost 400,000 origin crystals. It could be seen just how rich the people of the north region were. Comparing oneself to others would only make one angry. Everyone chatted for a bit, and naturally left one after another. Ling Han also made a trip to the Star Brilliance Pavilion to return the origin crystals he owed Long Yongzhang and the others. At first, he thought that if he didn't have enough money, he could use the 7 turns break crisis pill to make up for it, but he didn't think that the people of the North region would be so helpful. After Cheng Fei Jun disappeared for 2 days, he finally attracted the attention of the Star Brilliance Palace Hall. They sent people to search for this young grandmaster, but how could they possibly find him? At first, there were people who suspected that it had something to do with Ling Han, but very soon, they found out that Cheng Fei Jun was called over by Luo Jifeng's attendant. But now, not only had Cheng Fei Jun disappeared, even Luo Jifeng and his attendant had also disappeared, so it naturally had nothing to do with Ling Han. Ling Han decided to add fuel to the fire, and spread the news that Luo Jifeng was a disciple of the Thousand Corpse sect, causing the vast lands to be on guard against this evil sect. The Thousand Corpse sect could even do something like destroying the desolate north, so it was not impossible for them to destroy the north region, or even the entire vast lands. He had Guang Yuan, Zhu Wujiu, and the others spread the news. He only had to casually mention it in places like teahouses and restaurants, and this kind of gossip would quickly spread throughout the world as if it had wings. As expected, it had only been a few days, and the news of the Thousand Corpse sect had spread everywhere in the small town. How terrifying this force was, and how they wanted to turn the entire vast lands into a land of corpses. In the process of spreading the news, it would definitely be processed. Thus, the more the Thousand Corpse sect spread, the more evil it became. It was practically complete. Ling Han, however, felt that this was very good. The Thousand Corpse sect indeed needed to be more vigilant. This force was too evil. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.